Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Movie Mates podcast. I am Matthew, joined by my wonderful co-host and best friend.
Callum.
Hey man, how are you? So today it's episode 37 of the podcast, and we're going back into the sci-fi genre with the Back to the Future franchise. I'm really excited to
Yes.
talk to you about this one. So do you want to sort of explain to the viewers how many movies we're going to be talking about, and sort of what we're going to be talking about today? Then off to you, mate.
Yes. So in sort of a desperate attempt to do something productive, I've been trying to tick some movies off my film bucket list. So I've enlisted Matthew's help and excused this as productivity. So today we're going to be talking about Back to the Future 1, Part 2 and Part 3. And we have a lot to say today.
Absolutely,
Uh,
might be a long one.
can I jump into just a tiny little bit of context for the trilogy?
Yeah, no worries, man. So yeah, just hop into context. I'll time code this down below, like Back to the Future context talk. But yeah, crack on, pal, crack on.
Like I will have little pieces here and there throughout the analysis, but
No
just
worries.
I think the best part to start on was, I suppose, the original ideas for the film.
Go for it.
Originally, Doc Brown was called Professor Brown.
Oh,
Not
because
much
it's
difference
man.
there, but apparently a doctor's more trustworthy. Uh, Einstein the dog was originally a chimpanzee.
That's
And
interesting. I wouldn't mind
I
that.
don't like that really.
You don't like that?
I
Okay.
mean, I guess it's maybe as a parallel to the fact that the some of the first animals in space were primates.
Yeah.
Maybe
It makes more
and this was
logistical sense to be a dog, though, doesn't it?
does it?
Well, it's more of a
I guess
pet
as a
than a
I
chimp.
guess as a pet, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, and those two changes were made by a studio exec called Sidney Sheinberg. Uh,
What
but
a
he
name.
also wanted the title changed to Spaceman from Pluto,
I'm glad it wasn't that. That sounds shit.
which is why when like Marty crashes into the Peabody farmhouse, the kid is carrying a comic that says Spaceman
Oh,
from
cool.
Pluto. But apparently, which I found hilarious, like Robert Zemeckis, the director of the film, was like, "Oh shit," because like he absolutely did not want to change the title of the film.
Yeah.
So he actually enlisted Steven Spielberg, who was obviously a producer on the film, to sort it out. So Spielberg sent Sidney Sheinberg a memo saying like, "Thanks for the joke. We found it hilarious." So Sidney Sheinberg was like, uh, obviously Spielberg knew that Sheinberg was serious, but that like shamed Sheinberg into dropping the idea, which I
Oh,
think is brutal.
that is brutal. Like, don't get me wrong, Spielberg's pretty pretty important for the film industry, but that seems so brutal. Like that seems a bit uncalled for there, Stephen.
Because it's weird, but it's only weird because because it's not what the title is, and that
Yeah.
hasn't been ingrained in popular culture. But I think it's kind of a cool title.
Space. It's more interesting because it has a place in the film with like the kids comic, which I like. But Back to the Future sounds cool as well. I think like Back to the Future is a great title for like, a film.
But I think in the planning process, that's just as dumb. That's just as dumb. It just sounds normalized
Yeah,
because of
because
how
it's a
popular it
good
is.
point. So that's a really
Uh,
good point.
that's all I had to say for before we start into the actual films. But I have little nuggets of
Nuggets.
knowledge here and
No
there.
worries. No worries, man. But yeah, did you want to crack on with our first film, Back to the Future?
Yes, sure.
Let's do it, man. I'm just happy to be
So
here now.
the
So.
film well, the film is obviously carried by the two main leads, Doc Brown and Marty McFly, and comedian John Mulaney does a hilarious bit about the friendship between these two. And as he points out, there is literally no explanation as to why like a 50 to 70-year old is best friends with a high school teenager, and why a high school teenager is friends with a disgraced nuclear physicist.
I really like though that there's so much ambiguity there because I don't think we need. I think it's to a certain extent it's important, but I think the films in general develop their characters so well that it doesn't really matter how they met off screen, and I like that it's left ambiguous because I don't personally think it needs to be retold, but I can see if people think it does need clarification. Where do you stand on it?
Well, I think because Marty's 17, he's very close to being an adult. But I mean, if this friendship's been going on for like 6 years, there's maybe I'd maybe be suspicious. But because that's why we need at least some details. We need to know how long they've been friends. We don't necessarily need to know how it happened.
Yeah, like this film franchise in general, as much as I love it, it is filled with a lot of like sort of weird, I don't know, weird sexual tension. Do you get that? No.
Yeah, there's like incest plots and weird sex stuff where every character motivation is sex related. Like Doc Brown just follows his sex drive whenever in the third one.
Fuck's sake. Yeah, man. And like what? Yeah, as I said, I'm just happy to go by your notes and I'll film when I can. But one thing that really hooked me in this film straight away was like the opening scene with the clocks. I thought that was like an amazing visual, and obviously, referencing the title and stuff. But I think I just think the film's so well shot, and it's weird because well, on my platform and how I watched it, the aspect ratio was really strange. It was like shot like a TV show for me. I thought that was really really interesting.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that is odd. Yeah, I was watching it on DVD, so I guess it was just standard letterbox form for me.
Hmm. Yeah, but that's interesting, pal, because like the film is generally like so well shot and ahead of its time, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So with the introduction of Marty McFly that we see, that reminded me of the fact that Michael J. Fox was always the front runner for the role of Marty McFly, but due to his commitments to the TV show Family Ties, he wasn't actually able to be cast.
Okay.
So Eric Stoltz was originally cast as Marty, but he was fired from the film because he was considered dramatic but lacked the screwball comedy that the film needed. So eventually, he filmed for a full 4 weeks on the film. So they spent $3 million filming scenes with Eric Stoltz only to put them in the bin. So that they expanded their intended budget was around $14 million, but it blew out to $19 million in the end. But they spent a full $3 million on
Wow.
film footage that they never used, which I find hilarious.
Cash to splash.
Yeah. So eventually, Michael J. Fox was cast, and he shot Back to the Future at night while he shot Family Ties during the day. But when he was added to the cast, he the actress that originally played Jennifer had to be fired because Michael J. Fox is only 5'4", and she was apparently like way too tall to be considered his girlfriend. Feasibly considered his girlfriend. So she was fired, and like that's why in every scene with Doc and Marty, like apparently they used like really inventive camera tricks to make them appear a similar height. And like Doc's always like hunching by about like 6 inches.
Yeah.
If you notice throughout the films.
See, I
So
noticed there
I
was a
I
height
just thought it was
difference.
interesting.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I knew there was a height difference, but I didn't think he was like 5'4" short. Like that
Yeah,
is.
no, I looked it up because I was like it wasn't until the third film that I noticed, but I was like, yeah, he looks short.
And you know what it is about like the casting of a recasting of Jennifer, isn't it? Yeah, between the first and the second film.
Yeah, but also there was an original actress who
Okay.
who was fired along with Eric Stoltz.
That's okay. I can mention the recasting of Jennifer when we go on to part two anyway. But one thing about Marty McFly that I think he's personally in my top five for like protagonists in any film I've seen. I just think he's so great, and Michael J. Fox just embodies the 1980s kid so well. And I just love how Marty McFly, like he's not an idiot. He's really like he always thinks.
Well,
Well, I think generally he does think on his feet, and he's really proactive in the action scenes and stuff. And like he doesn't like I think he carries the film rather than Doc carrying the film for me. I think Michael J. Fox, and I just think the character of Marty McFly, he's one of my favorites in any sci-fi film series.
yeah, no, I fully agree. Definitely for this film, but I think he gets actively more stupid in part two.
Fair, yeah, fair, yeah. He kind of reminds me of a young Mark Hamill, from like the early Star Wars days.
Yeah, I sort of see that. So in this film, Marty is considered a slacker at school, and in one of the first scenes of the film, we're introduced to his principal, Strickland,
Yeah,
and there's one very painful moment to watch where Strickland gets so close that their noses literally
I
touch,
saw that. I was
and
like,
and
oh,
I was thinking, you know, if you really want to get out of being in trouble, like report him to the school board for inappropriate touching. I'm just putting it out there. You know,
You know what I love
you'll
so
have
much?
zero problems from him again.
I know, like, you know what I love so much about this film series in general? It's that like side characters like Strickland, they reappear in future films, and side characters like Biff turn out and they're like the main villains of the film. So I just love how it builds like a really condensed universe where the side characters are actually important and they
Yeah,
reappear. And I just love that like it feels like this universe. Like I only watched the first film 2 days ago, and it feels like as I said before, you off air, like it sort of feels like these films have been in my life forever because they just have such a I just think they have such an incredible universe built in here. And it gave me sort of weird like Terminator 2 vibes, not in the sense that it's like killer robots, but it's just the sort of like early 90s late 80s sort of vibes, and I just love that personally. I just think the universe is just so amazing and the characters are so like every character's fleshed out, do you know what I mean?
yeah, and more so than any franchise ever made. This is one 6 hour movie. Like this isn't
Absolutely,
three movies.
absolutely, that's a
You know
really
that
good
this
point.
is scene after scene. Like because I rewatched the sorry I watched the films like within like 2 minutes of each other,
Sure.
so
Yeah,
that there was no time difference. And I think the whole three films is meant to take place over about a week and a half. Like it's
I
not
love
it's
that,
not
man. I
taking
love
place
that.
over months or years. It is one story that happens to take place. Like this is just one of Doc Brown's inventions, and it just happens that we're seeing this one, which it's
Absolutely, man.
so weird to me,
I think you've nailed
and
it
I love it.
there. And you know what I love so much about the film? I love how, and like you said, it is like a 6 hour movie and they're all interconnected. We see, especially in the second film, there's a lot of crossover between, and it re-shows scenes that have already been shot, but from the future them, the future Marty's perspective or the future Doc's perspective. And I just love that interconnectivity. It kind of reminded me of how Endgame handled the Battle of New York in that
Yeah,
sense. And I can definitely see a clear influence in the way Endgame dealt with time travel and the way this film dealt with time travel, even with the branch timelines as well, sort of.
yeah. I do think if I saw these films years apart, I would probably criticize the fact that they're too similar and that they're just replaying the same scenes with, from a different character's perspective.
Sure.
But if you think of it as, act one, act two, act three of the same film,
Hmm.
it's incredible. Like
Absolutely.
it's a masterpiece. There's nothing to criticize. But I feel like if you waited 4 years to see Back to the Future Part Two, I might be somewhat disappointed.
Yeah, I agree, man. I agree. And I was doing some research after I had seen the first film. So the first one was 85, and then two and three were 89 and 1990, right?
Yeah.
Well, as
So
you, yeah,
parts two and part three were shot back to back. So that's why there were so many call forwards and visual gags that related from part two to part three because they already had part three completely planned out.
and you know what I love so much about the film? It has like and there are some annoying recurring gags. That, Marty gets triggered by people threatening him or like
Oh,
calling him a
we'll
chicken.
we'll talk
That's
about it in
bullshit.
part two. We'll talk about it in part two.
But the thing is, man, I just think it. The way like even and this is gonna sound so silly, but even the way like Marty's body is always sleeping. He sleeps with one arm on his chest and one arm on his back. I think even recurring gags like that, and even Marty like waking up thinking he's at home and had a terrible dream. I just love recurring gags like that in the film, and it really helps build the nostalgia for me, even though I've only watched them a couple days ago. Do you get me?
I do. Yeah, it's just things that I would have never considered if I were a filmmaker, and I'm just so impressed to see that. Like especially, visually played out, as you said.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. And I don't know whether to save this question for later, but I can ask it now, and if not, I can edit this out. Do you think this is the most iconic film series of all time? And if not, what do you think is? Because Back to the Future is probably one of the staples of sci-fi, and maybe that and like Star Wars and Blade Runner would rival it. But for me, I think this is the most like an iconic 1980s series of all time.
Yeah, I would say it's yeah, undoubtedly in probably the top three most influential sci-fi films, as you said, and I would say it's probably in the top five most iconic film
Maybe
franchises.
Ghostbusters in there as well.
I would probably consider the ultimate the ultimate film franchises like Back to the Future, Jurassic Park,
Oh yeah, yeah.
Star Wars, Terminator, and Indiana Jones. Those would probably be the
Those
top
are, yeah,
five
the top five. I'd agree.
most iconic pop culture franchises that create nostalgia for people, because obviously there are famous ones like James Bond and
Harry
the
Potter.
Bourne films,
Yeah,
and Harry Potter, but I just don't think they provide the same nostalgia
I agree,
level.
man. I think your top five was spot on. I would think that's probably the most, universally sort of agreed upon top five of like influential pop culture series, as you put it. So, it's really interesting, like, to hear your viewpoint on that as well, because I 100% agree. And I think without these films, you probably wouldn't get like films like Avengers Endgame. You probably wouldn't get films like I'm trying to think of other like Men in Black 3. I know that's a bit of a lesser example, but you know what I mean? Like, just general time travel films you probably wouldn't get.
Well, yeah, because this is time travel done right. So if we see really bad time travel in Avengers Endgame, they probably couldn't have even made it,
Yeah.
as good as that, and that was still shit, without Back to the Future.
Yeah, man. And I think time travel is done so well in this. It's just we'll get into it. We'll get into it, but yeah, I just think it's handled perfectly. So
Yeah. So we see that Marty is a cool '80s dude. He's skateboarding about the place, and I have to say, more than anything in this film, I respect his skateboarding skills,
oh
because
yeah.
I wish I could do that. I wish I had the courage. I mean, he always feels the need to prove he's not a chicken, but he's traveling
He's
by
a
holding
badass.
cars,
Yeah.
like, whilst he skateboards.
Yeah, and even like, I know we've mentioned recurring gags, but even the recurring gag of him using a skateboard for the first film and then the second film in the future, and like I
I did
just
roll my eyes at that part. I didn't like that callback.
fair enough, but like I just even the way like he flips it, he's just a cool guy. Like you'd want to be friends with this guy.
Yeah, yeah, I fully agree. So we're introduced to the second main character of the film, Doc Brown, uh, and he's brought Marty to this car park to have him record his first experiment with the time machine. And my first immediate reaction was that Doc is a real bad dude. Because, I mean, if you were gonna test your time machine, why are you using your pet?
Oh
If
yeah.
you're gonna use an animal, why wouldn't you use a miscellaneous one? And apparently, in test screens, the audience audibly gasped when they saw that, because they thought he was just gonna kill the dog.
I love Einstein. I have a note here. Like Einstein is one of my favorite characters in this film franchise because it's just a lovely little dog, and you gotta feel bad for Einstein because if that experiment goes wrong, that dog's dead.
Yeah, fully,
You know what
fully.
it is, man? See a whole DeLorean and like I know there's a lot of like oh, the DeLorean's iconic, especially in Northern Ireland because it was made in Northern Ireland. That's not the reason why I'm praising it. I just think it just the reveal and how it's shot. It's like it's almost as if the movie was trying to create an iconic moment, but it actually works. Like we've seen in films like, well, let's say Batman versus Superman, for example, like it's trying to create iconic moments with those two characters, but for some it missed the mark. I think for this film, it is trying to create an iconic moment with the DeLorean, and it 100% pays off because it's such a cool looking car, and it is futuristic in itself. And I just think
Yeah,
it completely hits that mark for me. I love that.
yeah. I agree. It does work on every level, and it was definitely 100% intended.
Yeah,
Because originally, in the first script, the original time machine was actually sort of a stationary device that was more like a fridge, or like it was made of fridge parts, so you would just sort of stand in it. It was kind of like the Bill and Ted phone box
sure.
time machine.
Yeah,
But then eventually it evolved into a car, because they found that that was more versatile, because you could actually drive it and transport yourself about the place even when you weren't time traveling. And then they decided on the DeLorean, because they thought that was the most feasible car to have the kid confused for a spaceship. So
yeah.
that's why it looks so cool, and I
Absolutely.
love it so
That's really
much.
interesting because, like, before I saw this film, my favorite time machine was always the TARDIS, just because how like unique it was. Bigger in the inside. That's a really cool gag. But for me, like the DeLorean is probably the best time machine. Like the Endgame ones, it's just shit. I like the when we first met time machine. Like I think that's a good idea. Like the photo booth. I think that's quite a cool idea. But I bet the DeLorean is just awesome. Even the design inside, it's just so intricate, and you can tell a lot of efforts went into like you know designing this thing. It looks so cool.
Yeah, with such a low budget, this could have either been, you know, an amazing feat of a film or a complete disaster, like,
Yeah,
very easily.
yeah,
Because even as you've sort of mentioned with the look of the DeLorean, it looks like incredibly cobbled together. But that has sort of become like the norm for sci-fi films because
Yeah,
you know
part of the
that
charm.
shows like sort of the mad scientist like cobbling together this new
Yeah,
creation.
true.
That is sort of the new aesthetic for sci-fi films, and I love to see that, even though that's sort of unintentional because they had such a minimal budget.
Absolutely, man. I think you've nailed it on the head there. And even all of Doc Brown's experiments in this film, like there's very little of CGI here, and like even with that, we've mentioned the opening visual of the clockwork and stuff, and even Doc Brown's, not to scale as he puts it, models of the experiments. They're just so intricately done. And it's clear that a lot of effort has been put in to actually make these models for the actual action scenes in the film, which I absolutely love.
Yeah, I fully agree. And he's sort of always declared as like a really shit inventor. But I mean, you
Which
know,
is nice, yeah.
even if your only life's accomplishment is that sort of like dog food machine,
Still great.
you've won life. Like you're making millions off of that if you can market it well.
Oh yeah, man. Oh yeah. And like I know this film, like I am sort of glad that they ended it with the third one, and we'll mention it like our thoughts on a potential fourth film. But it's so interesting. I know it's one thing that you mentioned at the start of this podcast when you said this is one of many inventions that the time machine is one of many inventions that the film hones in on. Like I'm sure there's so many different inventions or ideas that could have been explored in further films, and the fact that they've made such a successful franchise just out of a time machine is just so interesting because with a mad scientist like Doc Brown, there's so many different avenues you could go down, isn't there? Parallel universes, the lot. You can just do anything.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm glad they chose time travel and did it well.
Yeah,
I think it's
good.
better to go with one thing that you can do well than try and expand the universe and feel spectacularly.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Yes. So, one thing that I just in my memory, I had a pretty good hold on this movie. I knew quite a lot about the plot, but one thing that I just completely forgot about is the fact that Doc Brown is gunned down by the Libyan terrorists.
Man, that
Uh,
was so weird, wasn't it?
it's the weirdest part of like any movie I've ever seen.
I know, man. And like, I don't, like. I thought that. I thought that is that a memed moment in sci-fi because I've never heard of that being like made fun of, and it struck me as absolutely hilarious when one of them just whips out like an RPG out of nowhere. That was great.
I think I've heard of it once, and sort of the image of him lying down with like the bullets in his chest. I think I've seen in a meme, but aside from that, it was a complete surprise. And once again, I just find it so hilarious, and I think there's something wrong with us because like
You know
just
what it is, man.
every violent murder there's been in the last 3 weeks, like in the films that we've watched, we've just found
I
hilarious.
know. You know what it is, man. I can definitely. I don't know if you picked this up. I know you're a big fan of some of the Raimi films, maybe well all of the Raimi films to a certain extent, but I think there's definitely undertones of Back to the Future in the Raimi films, just in the sense that like scenes that are, I don't know if they're supposed to be intentionally funny, but are still laughed about to the same extent. Like I think in the sort of scenes that we've sort of mentioned that we found humor in, there are similar scenes in the Raimi films that we found humor in. So I think even in terms of comedy and stuff and recurring gags and motifs in the Raimi films, I think they are Back to the Future was definitely a subtle influence for that franchise. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Sam Raimi's always been to sort of repeat the same phrase that like Steven Spielberg uses to describe this film as like screwball comedy.
Yeah,
I would say the Evil Dead franchise and the Spider-Man franchise are some of the best examples in pop culture of that sort of brand of comedy.
absolutely, man. I really like that phrase, screwball comedy, because that's what it is. And you had mentioned, I think you might have mentioned to me, like, are these like were these designed to be kids' films? Because I was talking to my mom about these the other day, and she sort of regarded them as a mix between a kids' film and like a film that adults can also enjoy in sort of like a sci-fi regard. So, what do you think of the genre? Because it fits into so many, doesn't it? Rom-coms,
Yeah,
even.
so yeah, so the film was developed as the script, and then the the script was pitched to Columbia, I believe, and then they rejected it and said it's a little bit too kiddish for us,
Okay.
because back in the 80s there were sort of a lot of like teen sex comedies, so it was sort of like a film about a teen, but it was for kids, so they were sort of confused by it.
Yeah.
But they paid to develop it regardless. And then they said this film isn't for us, but maybe Disney might like it. So they took it over to Disney, and Disney said, there are a lot of kid elements in this, but also, the relationship with the mom is fucked. Like that is not
Yeah.
Disney.
Yeah.
So then they pitched it to Universal, and Universal loved it. But for some reason, they had already like been paid to develop it with Columbia, so the Universal now couldn't develop it. So there was this weird movie switcheroo where Universal gave Columbia the rights to this certain film so that they could make sort of this accidental remake of a film. I'll not go into it, but like it's this whole big thing where they were developing this film called Big Trouble, and it was too similar to a film that was made in the past, so they needed the rights to that old film.
Okay.
So there was this, unprecedented like movie switcheroo where they got the rights to Back to the Future, and they gave the rights to this film. So there's sort of no answers to whether it's a kids film or like a teen sex comedy, because it is sort of right in the middle, because those two studios that were famous for both of those genres both said it was too much of the other one to be developed by them, and then
Yeah.
Universal thankfully like met in the middle.
That's really interesting, man. That's fascinating because it kind of reminds me, well, or rather, the early Scooby Doo films that we reviewed, they sort of have a similar tone to Back to the Future, and there's definitely like a teen movie in there. And I don't know if you agree, but like I don't know, it just feels like it fits so well into so many different genres, like action, sci-fi, coming of age film. They have romantic comedy elements to it. There's just so many in there, and I think this
Incest horror film.
yeah, yeah. Like it fits. It does fit into so many, though, doesn't it? Like it's that's what's so great about it.
Yeah, I'm like we haven't even got into the part with Lorraine, but that is fucked. Like we will get there, don't worry.
Let's do it, man. Anyway, yeah, I'm just happy to go by any other points you had about sort of the opening, mate.
Yeah, I suppose it's just weird. Obviously, we see Marty travel back from 1985 to 1955, and it's kind of weird to see how unfamiliar he is with the surroundings. Seeming as that's set 30 years in the past, but 1985 for us was 35 years ago. So we're actually more in the future to his time period than he was to the 1950s, and I
Yeah,
just think that's really weird.
yeah, it is, man. It kind of got me thinking about for us going back to 1985, but also like I think, and like this is probably like I don't mean to like sound as if like oh we would have been much more we would have been a lot more smarter than Marty in Marty's situation. No, I'm not saying that, but like if we travel back to 1955, maybe it's because the country we live in it's not really that different from 1955 generally, so we probably would have been okay. But like going back to 1985, society is somewhat it'll definitely be recognizable, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think just because of films and TV, we have a much bigger cultural awareness of what it was like in the past, and I guess it was just a huge culture shock for Marty. I, th- I
Yeah.
think I think we would easily get used to technology and the jobs and the way things are done, newspapers and stuff,
True.
trivial things. I think it would be the more institutional and cultural attitudes that we couldn't get used to, because obviously we
Absolutely.
see
It's a great
we
point.
see only a brief example, but we do see racism
Yeah,
within the cafe that Marty visits. So that's one part of the society that I could not abide. So
absolutely.
that would be one one part of the film. Like if I were in Marty's position, where I would accidentally make it abundantly obvious that I was not from that time period.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Callum, because, and one thing is, it's very relevant to a recent news story that just broke, and I will time code this in the description about this. It's that, it's Gone with the Wind has been pulled from HBO Max. Have you heard about this?
I have not heard about this.
So, in a similar sort of sense to what you were talking about there, with Back to the Future presenting like the themes of racism that were more apparent at the time, and obviously the world's events at the minute, it's still around and it's still apparent. But in Gone with the Wind, apparently there was a lot of, I haven't seen the film, but there's a lot of undertone, well, explicit racism in that film, and it was pulled for HBO Max for presenting an outdated approach to society in that. And it was made decades ago. So it's interesting because Back to the Future, if I think if it would have had more themes and dealt with more themes of racism, it could have had the same fate as Gone with the Wind. So it's really interesting that we see that approach being made now, because we've seen movies from years ago deal with like homophobia and racism, and obviously
Yeah.
those should not be accepted. But it's really interesting where our society now is sort of showing our disapproval of that by removing films from platforms. So it does sort of tie into what you were saying there. But do you think Back to the Future could see the same fate as that?
I don't think so, because thankfully this film makes it objectively apparent that this is a critique.
Yeah,
We see that the character that is that experiences racism actually becomes the mayor of that town.
yeah,
So
yeah,
obviously, when we go back into the past and see, the film recognizes his genius, his potential to become mayor. So obviously, the film is acting as a critique by saying no one deserves this. So I think provided your film provides an objective critique of that theme, then there's no reason to not explore that. As long as it's a positive message critiquing that outdated way of thinking. I've never seen Gone with the Wind, so I don't actually know how it deals with the subject of racism. I know that Scarlett O'Hara is the daughter of a plantation owner, so that's inherently bad. But I don't know whether the film acts as a critique. But obviously, if it's been taken down from HBO Max, it's probably insensitive to the issue.
yeah. That's really a fascinating point there, Callum, because like that's another side character we haven't talked about, the mayor of the film. And like we see his relatives in the future, I think, or maybe it's the past, or maybe both. I can't exactly remember because the films are so similar, but that's a good thing, I suppose. But that's another side character we haven't even talked about, and it's just so the film universe is just so great because there's so many great side characters there. And I think that's really like subtly empowering that like a black resident of the town rises up to be a really successful mayor. I think that's great. And it's actually Marty, I suppose, that inspires him when he travels back to 1955. So I just think it's such a great message in there as well.
Yeah, definitely.
My man, see, my handwriting is so bad. See, it's
Also, like, I've just lost my place because like it's all just words. So we're introduced to the character of George McFly, his younger self, in the same diner that Marty meets the soon to be mayor Goldie.
yeah.
We're introduced to George McFly, and we were told previously that he was hit by Marty's granda's car because he was bird watching in the street. But as we find out, he's actually a
Creeper,
peeping
peeping
tom
tom.
that stares at Lorraine through the window. And I just wrote that he deserved not only to be hit by the car but run over and killed.
Yeah, it's not exactly like the 500 Days of Summer, or rather with Autumn sort of romance that like it was meant to be, because he was just spying on her from like the top of a tree in a really creepy way. It's not the sort of thing that you imagine a marriage starts from, is what I mean.
Yeah, yeah. It's not the classic love story,
No, it's
classic meet cute. Uh,
definitely not. Like,
but if I were Marty, like I wouldn't be trying to get my parents together. I'd probably just not want to exist anymore if that's what my dad was like.
I just love Marty's reaction. Like he's a peeping tom. Like I love that. But one thing I actually do love about George and Marty's relationship is that Marty does stand up to Biff for his dad, and I think that was really sweet because Marty's a really strong character. He's really strong-willed, and he won't give in to a challenge, and he never gives in to a challenge. He always like stands up and tries to conquer it. So I just love that because I think that there were, and I've seen plenty of theories that suggest George knows that Marty is his son for the future, but just plays along. Have you heard these?
I haven't heard that, but I also don't believe that because I honestly think that George is like too dumb to realize that. Honestly,
You know what it is about George? I didn't realize this. Is is he plastered in makeup? Because his face is perfect. Like it's so shiny and like crystal clear. It's great. It looks like he's plastered in makeup. Is he?
I'll be honest. I'd never thought about it.
Really?
Honestly, yeah.
Does the film make you feel bad for George because he's sort of like a like he's bullied in the local elementary school, which I feel is sad for him because he seems like a nice guy apart from the peeping tom stuff.
Yeah, in that just as soon as you said that, I sort of throughout the film forgot the peeping tom part and was like, I do feel bad at sort of the malicious bullying.
Yeah.
But yeah, sort of knowing that kind of calls into question the morality of the character, and I'm kind of like, yeah, I really don't know how I feel about that, honestly. Well,
Yeah.
I do know how I feel about that. Disgusted. Uh, so yeah, I don't.
Do you feel this?
Nah.
I take it you feel disgusted by Lorraine wanting to pursue a
Ugh.
romantic relationship with her own son. Like, there's one particular line that I quite enjoyed, well, not well, was disgusted at, where she goes, where Marty goes, Lorraine, how did you know I was here? Lorraine responds, I followed you here. Brilliant. What? Stalking.
Yeah.
Both parents are
Yeah.
stalkers.
No.
Brilliant.
Exactly the point. Like, I'm fully aware of the fact she doesn't know it's her son, so she's sort of blameless for being attracted to him. But the following him and such is still blameworthy, regardless of whether she realizes that's her son, because it's still harassment,
Oh yeah.
whether he's a relation or not. And she sort of says that the reason she's like, like she's a bit shocked because uh she'd never seen purple underwear before. But has she ever seen a human before? Because she's staring at his face like she hasn't.
She is mesmerized by Marty, isn't she?
Yeah, I mean he's a good looking lad, but I mean she keeps calling him a dream. Like she is fully harassing this guy.
You know what it is, man? Like, I think the film sort of handles that in a really humorous way. But when you look more into the detail of like her character, like she's an alcoholic as well. It seems in the sort of the original timeline in which it's
She's
set.
17. She has like a few drinks.
Yeah, I know. But I was looking in the Wikipedia of this film for the plot of this afterwards, just to see like, have I watched this in the correct, like, have I analyzed this the same way? And apparently her character was characterized as the plot as Marty's mother Lorraine, an overweight and alcoholic mother. But I never got that she was. I don't think she was ever overweight or anything in the original film, but in the original timeline, because Marty says, "Mom, you're so thin," but she just looked the same to me.
Yeah, I guess that was the intended portrayal, but I mean, even sticking Leah Thompson in a fat suit is questionable. Like I feel like artificially, making someone look larger than they are can sometimes be an offensive portrayal.
Yeah.
Uh,
And as you
I,
said,
I don't I don't think they went too far in this film. What it wasn't Shallow Hal where they put Gwyneth Paltrow in a fat suit where that was just offensive.
and like you said, man, about like she just has a few drinks, but then the Wikipedia and the plot synopsis characterizes her as an alcoholic. I was like, I don't know if the film shows enough to warrant that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it does show her drinking vodka like it's water, at the start, but that's why I was sort of surprised that Marty's like, "What, Mom? You drink?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, you've seen her drink." But yeah, it wasn't enough to categorize her as an alcoholic. I think that's a bit far.
Yeah, I agree, man. Completely agree.
Yeah, so we're shown Strickland again, but in the 1955 timeline, and he looks the same.
Exactly
But
the
also,
same.
he seems to consider George McFly a slacker for being bullied. Like, where does that logic come from?
Yeah, I know. Like, I expected when Strickland says to Marty in the original timeline, where like, "Oh, your dad, you're just like your dad. You're a slacker." I was expecting like a guy in like a leather jacket who like skateboards around, like a Peter Parker from the Amazing Spider-Man type, sort of like has the
Right.
potential, but is like a bit of a rebel. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
And then George McFly is like this weedy little nerd, and he's literally getting like his books thrown on the floor, and he's like, "For fuck's sake, McFly, you fucking slacker!" And I'm like, what? Where does that mindset come from? I have no idea.
I know, man. I know.
And yeah, just the whole plot of Lorraine trying to bang her son honestly just makes me want to vomit. It's one of the most uncomfortable storylines I've ever seen.
I think it's handled well in the sense that it's comedic to a certain extent. But the bit where I did get a little bit uncomfortable is where she's like in the car with him in a quite clearly like a very revealing dress, which I thought that was like, I was like, oh, this girl's probably like
Yeah.
17 or something, or 16. I was like, oh, stop.
Are
You
you
know
are
what I
you
mean?
also are you also forgetting the fact that she kisses him and I
Oh yeah.
genuinely gagged. I fully gagged
Yeah.
because I mean that's to the film's credit because they really made me buy the mother-son relationship for me to be so disgusted by that. I must have believed them as mother and son.
Yeah. Yeah, man. And one sort of point I wanted to mention about sort of like the different timelines and the hardships of time travel presented in the film was, and it's a scene just before that, and it's when Doc, the 1955 Doc says it'll be 30 years until he sees Marty again, but for Marty it'll just be a few seconds. And I think that really does. It's something that I never really thought about until after the film, and it kind of reminded me of Avengers Endgame. And I know I keep bringing that up, and I don't mean to, but it's the scene where like Steve Rogers like hands over the shield to Sam Wilson, and like for Steve Rogers in that film, it's been what, like so many decades, like 50 years at least, or 7 years or whatever, and like for Sam it's just been like a few seconds. And I think that really presented the hardships of time travel there, and it's quite sad. And especially in this film, like when you think about it, for 1955 Doc, in the original timeline, we'll forget all the Western stuff, let's just say hypothetically for the 1955 Doc it would have been 30 years, whereas for Marty it would have been a few seconds. So that's quite a sad thing to think, isn't it?
Yeah, how lonely it must be for people left on like the other side of the time traveler.
Yeah, like have you ever seen the Doctor Who episode The Girl in the Fireplace?
I think so. Is that the one with like the like Victorian robot
Yeah.
clowns or whatever? Yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
have seen that.
Yeah, it's sort of similar to that, because like for the Doctor it's just been a few minutes, but for her it's been yeah, it's been her whole life. And I think it does present the hardships of time travel. I would have liked to see that maybe explored in the further films, because like the film sort of all the films like collectively as a saga, I suppose, build up a lot of consequences, but it ends up there's a happy ending in general. So I would have liked to present maybe like the consequences of time travel, you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to
You're
sort out
okay,
my
don't worry about it.
wireless charger.
No worries, man.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, yeah, I fully agree. Yeah, I would have loved to see the consequences.
Awesome. What page are you on now? Is that two?
I'm 1/5 into my notes.
Awesome, man. Awesome.
Yeah, so Marty, for some baffling reason, agrees to go to the dance with his mom, and most of these events could have been circumvented by him just like outright refusing her and saying, "Absolutely not! I don't want you. I hate you, bitch." And I'm using that language because he should have destroyed all positive feelings that she had for him. She should
Yeah,
he
you should
should
have ruined the
absolutely
relationship.
destroy her so that she's like, wow, what a piece of shit. I mean, he'll probably end up with a different name because they won't want to honor him with the same name as the piece of shit that dumped her.
Yeah,
But how do you expect to like force her and George together if she's like so madly in love with you? You destroyed that love.
yeah.
So
See,
I think a lot of this could be avoided by just treating her like absolute shit and then getting George to like come in and defend you. I feel like that just completely avoids the weird sexually charged prom car scene and the
I suppose
kiss.
I suppose that was the original plan. To Marty's defense, I suppose that was the original plan for when he intended to like. I don't know what he was intending to do to Lorraine, by the way, until Biff showed up. That kind of did distress me a little bit. But
Yeah, he said
regardless,
that there'll be like a tussle in the car, but does he mean he's gonna punch her or try and have sex with
I
her?
don't
Like that
know.
was so unclear.
That's why I got a little bit distressed during that. I was like, I don't want to, because I was really really with Marty up until that point. I was like, don't do anything you will regret here, buddy. But yeah, from Marty's perspective, I would have liked. I would have been a little bit like if I was in Marty's shoes, I would have been a little bit worried about like romancing my own mother. Like, do you know, not in the sense that like I want to, but in the sense that like you have to make George look good in this scene. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, how far was Marty willing to go is the real question. And like, it's weird that he would even put himself in a position where anything could happen. I mean, obviously he put himself in the position and he got kissed by his mother. But some like other shit could have happened, which
Yeah.
has been parodied on a TV show called Future Man, starring Josh Hutcherson. Right after I watched this, I went back and watched that episode, and it does a really funny take on it, but it's disgusting. Uh,
Yeah, man, I can
Pretty
understand
much
why.
the brief summary is that this guy Josh has been time traveling with these two people to try and avoid this virus outbreak in the future, which changes humanity. And he goes back to make sure that his parents meet in a big parody of the Back to the Future franchise. and he directs his dad to speak to this woman that he believes is his mom, and then he goes and romances her friend without realizing that the friend is his mom, and he
Oh,
he kisses her and romances her, and there's other stuff that I'll not get into, but
oh,
it's
that's gross.
disgusting, and I mean, yeah, he'd 100% have PTSD after that.
Oh yeah, late.
Just go and watch Future Man. It's a great show, but that is one of the most uncomfortable episodes of any TV show
I
I've
can
ever
understand
seen.
why, man. Oh yeah. On a side note, you mentioned deadly virus there. All right, and this is a complete side note that is in no relation to Back to the Future, so I can edit this out, but I can keep it in if you want to. Did you see the latest post in the Planet Broadcasting about V for Vendetta?
No, I had not.
So someone had Googled the plot for spoilers for V for Vendetta, by the way, for anyone who hasn't seen it. I haven't seen it, but this is just the plot for it. Have you seen it? You've seen it, yeah?
I have seen it, yes.
No worries. So someone had like Googled V for Vendetta, and the plot synopsis comes up when you Google it, and it says like in 2020 a deadly virus has like took over the earth. Like some Americans have died, and Britain is ruled by like a really conservative totalitarian state. And or sorry, government. I was like, I can see the resemblance.
Yeah, from memory, I don't really remember that coming across, and it's obviously it's meant to be sort of parallel to like George Orwell's 1984,
Sure.
but with like a presence that rises up that has more courage than Winston. I know you haven't read 1984, but it is very similar in many
Yeah,
aspects.
I can understand
I,
why.
I love I love V for Vendetta. I'd love to talk about it. Either we could do a review like on the 5th of November in reference
Yes.
to Guy
Oh,
Fawkes,
that'd be fun.
or we could do an Alan Moore episode, which
Oh,
would have like Watchmen
Watchmen.
and other really good projects,
That'll be a
and some
bit.
not good ones like League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Yeah, like I have seen that movie when I was really young, but it's not great.
I've heard it's absolute trash, so that obviously means I want to watch it.
Absolutely, man. But anyway, back to the future, or rather back to yeah, well, yeah, Back to the Future. So
Yes.
have you got any other points about that sort of time of the film with the weird Marty Lorraine romance?
Yeah, well, we see that George defends what winds up not defending, Lorraine against Marty, but actually against Biff.
Hmm.
And it's a lot darker than I imagined because Biff was essentially trying to attempt to rape Lorraine,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
which move on to that later. I mean, I wish we didn't have to, but it is a serious part of the film that I had no memory. Well, I hadn't seen the film, but also I had just no memory in pop culture of that being a consideration. Because I mean, Biff is sort of presented as like a bad dude, but he isn't like he's presented as a bully, but not a
Yeah,
monster,
yeah,
which he clearly turns out to be. And I never think
completely.
he really gets his just desserts. It's like, ooh, he drove into more shit. Like he doesn't get
Yeah.
arrested.
The thing is, man, about the Biff character, and we'll mention this more in the third film, and probably in the second film as well, because in the second film he sort of becomes like this universe's version of the Kingpin. I don't know if you'd agree that there's similar undertones there. Um, why doesn't anyone, and particularly in the third film, just shoot him? And why doesn't no one like blow his brains out? Especially in the Western culture where that was probably accepted. Like I know that's not Biff in that timeline. It's a distant relative, but like Biff, as you said, like he does some really evil acts here, but it's played off as like a gag where he just drives into a pile of manure, doesn't he? So
Yeah, it is weird. Like he probably is deserving of jail or death, but I guess just no one like pretty much all the other characters are morally above committing such an act. Like he's the only character in this franchise that would do something as awful as murder someone.
yeah.
So I guess there's just no one who could have done it, aside from himself.
You know what? And you know what it is, man. I really like the Biff character. Not as obviously his actions, but I think he's characterized as the villain so well. And he's another side character that you think will go nowhere, but then ends up being the villain pretty much of the second film and of the third film. So I think it's really interesting to see how that character has developed, and and how like we see different versions of him. We see the 1955 Biff where he's like he's a rash, sort of hot-tempered young teen, and then we see sort of like a middle-aged Biff, where he's sort of like a subservient, you know, assistant to the McFly family, and then we see the future Biff, where he's like a cunning old dude. So I just think it's so interesting, that character's transition, and I think he's one of the best characters in this saga. Not like, obviously his acts aren't morally acceptable at all, but I think he's so well characterized.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. Obviously, a morally condemned character,
Yeah,
a terrible person,
yeah,
but an amazing portrayal of a villain, especially
absolutely.
from the actor. Who actually, like the actor Thomas F. Wilson, hates being asked about Back to the Future.
Really?
Like, he's so sick of it. He's a stand-up comedian from time to time, and he actually wrote a whole song about how much he hates being asked about Back to the Future, and he answers like all the questions that you would expect to be asked. So if you want to watch that, look it up. It's,
Yeah,
it's
that's
it's really funny, and he just answers like, they ask, are the hoverboards real? It's a movie.
yeah.
So he just sort of in a blasé manner answers all the questions that he is sick of being asked.
Yeah, and I'll, if I can find that video clip, mate, I will link it in the description for anyone who wants to check it out. Because yeah, I'd recommend people with anything to do, and also before I was gonna say, I would recommend anyone to like who wants us to like just learn more about this saga, because it is so interesting. There's a really great clip of what's Christopher Lloyd did like an anniversary video for the franchise. I don't know if you've seen it, but like it's really great. It's and it's sort of him assuming the Doc Brown persona, I think, again. So I'll link that in the description below. It's on the Universal YouTube channel. So yeah, check Callum's clip out, and then check the Doc Brown one, because I think this film's, as we said, like the saga is so compelling. So yeah, support it if you can.
Great. Sorry.
All right.
Yeah, great, Matthew. So it's sort of weird. Marty steals the song of Johnny Be Good from Chuck Berry, and then it's re-established in this continuity that Chuck Berry took the idea from Marty. So it sort of steals the idea of Johnny Be Good from black culture. So that is an issue,
Yeah.
and it is problematic of this film to sort of present Chuck Berry as a thief. But even regardless of that, just the reaction confuses me, because they're all sort of very lively and they're dancing to the song, and then at the end of it, they all just look angry. It's like, you seem to enjoy it a moment ago, but now you seem so angered and annoyed by it.
Yeah, man, I really love when like Marty's jamming out on the guitar. I think that's great. And one thing I really think, what characters that are really understated in the film are really underrated, are the jazz band. Because I think one of the most special scenes in the film is when Biff's goons are like, or I think it's Biff even, and like he's like harassing a member of the band to like get out of the car, but like all the band members emerge from the car. I thought that was really really well shot. It was quite like an interesting like dynamic to have, because I'm not sure like in this film, the way in the second film we see future Marty like knock out Biff's goons with some sandbags. Do you think that is in the original movie, or do you think that was just for the second movie, if you know what I mean? Because obviously that like the future Marty would have to be in this movie, but just not shown.
No, I think the original events, like I think the first sequence of events are the 1955, where just everything happened normally.
Yeah.
George got hit by the car, he met Lorraine, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Then the second version of events, Marty inserts himself into that experience, changes things, and then tries to fix them.
Yeah.
And then in Back to the Future Part Two, a third version of events happens with all of those changes made in Part Two.
Yeah.
But now a second Marty has been reintroduced. So I don't think in this film, when we watch this film, I don't think there's a second Marty in those
Okay.
scenes.
Okay. I get
Technically,
you. I get you. Time
it's
travel
just
films.
weird. It's just things happen again, and we see them changed. Yeah, it is. I would say this is probably the best portrayal of time travel in a film, but even it's still a little murky. Like,
Sure.
my
Okay.
next point is a question about the timeline. If I can ask
Go
that
for
to
it.
you.
Go for it, man.
So we see that Marty travels back to his present, or back to the 1955's future,
Hmm.
uh, and he looks on as Doc Brown gets shot, and his past self goes into the past using the DeLorean. And I was just wondering, what happens when the version of Marty that he's watching that went back into the past returns? Because now at that point there'd be two Martys, right? because now when he comes back, he doesn't have to stop the death of Doc Brown, but he thinks that Doc Brown's dead. So when he comes back to the present and sees there's no Doc Brown there because Doc Brown's alive, there are now two Martys in the
It's a
present, surely.
paradox then, sort of, is it?
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe time fixes it. Like this rule. Sorry, this movie. Thankfully, it doesn't set the rules of time. Like, we're gonna shit on Avengers Endgame again. It sets the rules of time travel and then breaks them. At
Yeah,
least this film doesn't set any, so we can just sort of
that's
create
good.
the rules in our mind.
Yeah, that's a good
So
point.
I guess we can just say that time fixes itself, and because his goal with coming back to the present was to save Doc Brown's life, because he did, everything's fine, and it just
Yeah.
irons out and it's fine. Let's just say it's fine.
Yeah. And you know what it is, man? It's a really interesting point, Callum, because it sort of got me thinking about Flash season 3. So spoilers for Flash season 3.
Uh,
And it sort of reminded me of the plot there that Savitar, because he's a future Barry, our present Barry is making memories that impact Savitar, right? So that is right, isn't it?
yeah.
So
So
in this film,
Savitar is future Barry's time remnant. So he's not even future Barry. He's like a time displaced time remnant of future Barry.
yeah,
So he has all of Barry's memories. So as Barry's actively deciding to change his
he knows
memories,
what's going to happen.
so too do Savitar's.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's got me thinking about this film. And I can understand because it doesn't set up time travel rules that it doesn't really have to follow this. But it got me thinking about so present Marty. So this is I apologize for viewers who are about to listen to this because this is just a ramblings of a madman right now. But anyway, so shouldn't present Marty be making like I can't really I don't know how to describe it, but future Marty shouldn't he or shouldn't present Marty be making memories that future Marty should I don't know how to explain that, but like I can't really explain it, but I think some sort of process where one Marty makes memories that he should know how events will already occur as to already do it. So he shouldn't be acting confused. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I think like the memories that Marty makes should impact how he time travels, basically.
I guess it's because the Marty that we're always watching, whenever he goes back to 1985, it's always that he's going back to the same date, which is whatever, like I actually don't remember the date, but every time he goes back to the same date in 1985, so he's always like a few days ahead of that. So he's always the future version of Marty in 1985. So I guess his memories wouldn't impact the past version of him that goes back into the past or goes into the future, because
Okay,
he's always like a few days ahead. So he's making memories that only impact him, and I guess future versions of him. But I suppose the 2015 version of him seems to, I don't know, they seem worried about like having him run into past or like present 1985 Marty, even though he would surely remember his adventures with Doc Brown, so it wouldn't be an issue.
yeah, yeah. I suppose we'll mention it in the second film more when we mention it there. But like, actually, I will leave that point until we talk about it. But I think Doc Brown's message is right. Like, you shouldn't probably mess with the fabric of space and time. Like, it's a complicated whirlpool of scenarios, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So Marty is successful in saving Doc Brown, and he returns to his home to find out that his dad has been a roaring success in the sci-fi book business. Uh, and I was just wondering that, uh, you know, even for the sake of irony, would you hire your wife's attempted rapist? I
No,
don't think
no,
so.
don't do that. Yeah, and that's the thing, man. Like, we've talked about like the happy endings that like surround the saga, and that's where it sort of like it doesn't necessarily lessen my enjoyment of the film, but like I think there's definitely should have been more consequences of the time travel. And like it seemed like it was wrapped up in a nice little bow where George was more successful than Biff and stuff. And I'm not saying I would have liked to see Biff happy because he's obviously like an awful person, not a very nice character. But I would rather Doc had died in this film to present a sort of scenario where Marty realizes time travel, like he can't fix everything. Like there's some things that are destined to happen, like that, and he can't do everything. And it's a sort of similar arc that we've seen with in the Spider-Man films. Like Peter's got all these amazing powers, but he can't fix everything. Like he can't change Uncle Ben's fate. So I would just like to see that explored here.
Yeah, I guess Spider-Man's a hero, so he thinks of everyone, but Marty's actually only concerned about himself. So we actually only see the changes that are made to Marty's life. But I don't know, maybe it widely, made the world worse. Like his travels through time obviously made his life better because his dad's now confident and successful,
Sure.
and he's still dating Jennifer, and he has the car that he wanted. So
Yeah.
his life is vastly improved in his mind, but he might have actually like ruined the rest of the world, but we don't know that because we only sort of see what happens to his life. So maybe there were huge consequences that we're just not aware of.
And that's a really interesting point, Callum, because it sort of got me thinking about time travel. And this is going to be another mindless rambling, but I don't know. I think it's interesting. So, for me, regardless of when, even I think maybe in the reality that we're living in, right? If I time traveled back to the day we first met or something like that, surely this is from my perspective, so I don't know if this is like true in the fabric of space and time or whatever, but like in this film, surely it's always destined that Marty will travel back in time to 1955, and he'll travel into 2015 to help save the lives of his kids or whatever. So in that sense, there is just one continuous timeline where he's always destined to do that. So there shouldn't be a fixed timeline. I don't know if you get me, but I just thought it was an interesting theory. I don't know.
So you're sort of saying you think it's like the chicken and the egg scenario where you know whenever you've gone into the past, your present self was always present in that past, and you were destined to always go back to that time period.
Yeah, so yeah, exactly, man. So in this sort of scenario where like the day I was born, or the day Marty was born, he was always destined to meet Doc Brown and go back in time and do this. So in that sense, there is just one continuous timeline, and the future is never actually set. So maybe that is what, because we see Doc Brown say the future's never actually set. So I don't know. Maybe that is the case in this. I don't know. I don't think my brain can comprehend it, but
I don't know. In my mind, there's always been one sequence of events, and then when time travel is introduced, everything goes out the window, and
sure.
you can now go back in time and change things. But I still think there was a first instance of a version of the fuck my life of the version
I
of
get you.
events that happened definitively, and then you've gone into the past to change that.
Mhm.
So I still think
That's a
that
really interesting, man. Yeah, it's really
I,
interesting.
I don't I don't think it's always destined that he was meant to go into the past. I think things
Yeah,
things change in the time stream when time travel is invented.
yeah, that's interesting, man. That's really interesting. Have you got any other points about Back to the Future one?
Well, just sort of the end scene of the film where Doc Brown returns to the present to tell Marty about his future. But when he returns to the present, because this is now, 1985 Doc Brown in the present, that makes the future hypothetical. So why is he planning on traveling into the future to change the further future? Because at this point in time, the future is hypothetical. So just return to the present and make whatever changes are necessary now. Why would you go into the future to prevent the future?
Yeah.
It's just baffling to me. The future hasn't happened yet, so you can just prevent it from this time, or at least live your life until the point where you need to prevent it. It
Yeah,
just seems completely aimless to me.
like he could have went back to just normal 1985 and just say to Marty and Jennifer, "You're gonna have kids. Just make sure he's not involved in crime or whatever." Like you don't have
Yeah,
to go.
just say raise your kids better, like that.
Yeah,
That's problem solved.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting. And I have one question for you. Like, how do you feel about Marty's life being drastically changed, where his dad is super successful? Because it sort of felt to me like I don't know if you believe in like fate and destiny, but it always seemed like the original timeline was one in which where Marty's dad was not. It was quite like a mild mannered guy, whereas his mother Lorraine was more like, as we said, well, as the film's plot synopsis which yes was like an overweight alcoholic, which we both disagreed with. But anyway, like how do you feel about his life being better? Because like you said, he seems to be more of his Marty seems to be engaged in more of his own self interests.
Yeah, I guess I'm happy to see George happier, and clearly the backstory to their love story enriched their relationship, so they seem happier than they did in the original timeline. So that's good. But I think Crispin Glover, who played George McFly, sort of questioned the message of the film because he said, the time travel in the film, sort of led to financial gain. It didn't lead to love. So he's sort of saying that it's kind of an empty message because the time travel led to financial success. It led to Marty getting a car. It didn't lead to an enrichment of love, which I kind of disagree with because him and Lorraine did seem to have a stronger
Yeah,
relationship
I agree.
after Marty's influence.
I agree, man. I think you've hit the nail on the head there, buddy. And I think like I was happy for him and Lorraine because it seems like they were happier regardless of their financial wealth, and I'm glad they ended up together because I was rooting for them. I can't lie, I was rooting for them.
Yeah, definitely. So the entire end tag of the film was actually intended as a joke. Like there was no intention to make a sequel to this film,
Really?
and it was only after the huge success of the film that the filmmakers were
That's really interesting.
pressured by the studio to make a sequel. So
Okay.
they actually had no aspirations to do so. Like
Wow.
the end was just meant to be a piss take and be like, "Oh, it's going to continue," and then it wasn't meant
I love
to.
that. I
So
love that, yeah.
that meant that it was an awkward process for them because that meant that they had to like shoehorn Jennifer into the second film. Like they had to write the film around having her character instead of just creating like an independent an independent adventure.
I love that, man, and I think the film, like we've said about it being like a saga of a 6 hour movie, I think it handles that really well, and the fact that that was sort of like a one off gag it is quite interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I love that idea so much. But had I actually been a viewer and I loved this film so much, and then they teased me with a sequel and then said,
Cancelled
"Nah, it
it.
was a joke,"
Yeah,
that would piss me off so much.
absolutely,
So I'm glad that they were pressured to make a sequel. Honestly.
completely, man, completely.
So did you have any final points on the film?
I didn't know, man. Did you?
Nothing more from me. So I'd love to hear your rating, Matthew, of the film.
So as I said, this film sort of developed a lot of like good memories for me. And it's one of those films where I don't know if you get this feeling often when you watch a film, and the only other film that I've really had that had like this is probably Terminator 2 and 500 Days of Summer, where I watch it and I feel like I'm gonna remember my first viewing of this film. And it's like, do you know what I mean? Do you ever get that feeling when you watch a
Yeah,
film?
I do. I do definitely.
So for me, this has to be a 10 out of 10. Like it's a film I can definitely see myself rewatching, and I think it's an absolute masterpiece. So what about you, mate? You had some great points in there.
Yeah, so the only thing I could ever perceive as a negative to this film is its portrayal of some themes and its trivializations of some really dark and some dark themes that should have been treated with more respect. But I think that is the film acting as a critique of the blasé attitudes towards some really horrible events that would have taken place in the 50s, and
Yeah,
that was just sort of overlooked, and villains like Biff didn't get the justice that they deserved. That they were able to just roam free. So I think the film acts as an accidental or on purpose, complete critique of events that take place like that.
yeah,
And the Biff did deserve a greater justice. It's just that because of the times that he grew up in, that didn't happen.
yeah,
So I can't fault the film for that. It's just showing us how society was, and fortunately how we've made progressions, for the better in some regards.
yeah,
So you know that would be the only critique I could possibly have of the film, and that's just it being of its time and presenting a critique. So
yeah.
that's in some ways a positive for the film. So in every other regard, it's a perfect film, and I have to give it a 10 out of 10.
Man,
Also,
I honestly, I think that's probably one of the one of the most, if not the most, like compelling review you've ever given. Like it was so detailed. I thought your final wrap up of that was really inspired, and I completely agree with everything you've said. And do you think it was more of like the time era, like or the time era that doesn't make sense? The year in which it was set in, like 1985, and the society wasn't as modern thinking as it is now.
yeah, I think it's dangerous. Like to, I mean, I know this is not what you're doing. Obviously, I'm saying that this is what some people do. If say an older person with a horrible attitude by our modern standards, or a film with some really inappropriate portrayals of certain themes, it can't be excused by saying, "Oh, it's of the time."
Yeah,
"Oh,
like
they were born in a different time." They can't possibly learn. It's like, of course you can learn. But to say something that is excusable because of the time, you can't say that. But I think that this film is actually acting as a critique in
yeah,
1985, as a criticism uh, of what went on in say the 50s, and how people didn't get the justice they deserved. which is why Marty tries to, you know, he tries to, get one over on Biff as much as he can, within the realm of the justice system.
So in that instance, do you think the movie is ahead of its time?
Yeah, I mean, if that's intentional, definitely, because it's saying that, being, passive to negative attitudes of, to be racist or to, you know, attempt to rape someone is, obviously horrific.
Yeah.
And I think this film is trying to say that, the people who did those acts in the past weren't brought to justice. So, that this film, I guess, is just being realistic about the fact that, people didn't get the justice they should have. So I do think it's ahead of its time in recognizing that.
Man, I completely agree. I think you've hit the nail on the head there, buddy. And I was really great. It's really interesting because this film, in many ways, it's relevant to ongoing news stories at the minute, isn't it?
Yeah, in many regards. I mean, it's awful that, anything in this film, that's set 35 years ago, that could anything in relation to that could
Yeah,
still be in the news right now.
absolutely.
That's
Yeah,
completely horrific.
I know it is, and it's something I think it's really well developed throughout the franchise and how it deals with those themes and stuff. And did you want to crack on with the part two then? Yeah,
Yeah, so if I could do a little intro about why we don't see Crispin Glover as George McFly,
go for it.
would that be all right?
Go for it, man.
So in the second and third film, Crispin Glover was set to have his role reduced and have his pay reduced from the first film,
Okay.
which he completely refused to accept, which is perfectly justifiable. After this film was a roaring success. It ended up blowing out to a $19 million budget, but it made around $330 million. So
Wow.
I mean, it was one of the biggest successes ever.
Yeah.
So Crispin Glover was that they intended to reduce his pay bafflingly. Uh, so he was replaced with Jeffrey Wiseman, uh, but they used they used prosthetics based on a mold taken by Crispin Glover to make Jeffrey Wiseman look like Crispin Glover. So Glover sued the filmmakers of the film, saying that he
Wow.
did not give them permission and was not paid to have his likeness used by the filmmakers. So the lawsuit actually led to him making 3 times the amount of money that he was set to gain by actually appearing in the film. So he didn't have
Wow.
to do anything, and he made 3 times as much money. So I mean, I'm sure he walked away happy enough.
Absolutely.
But the Screen Actors Guild had to establish a rule where you can't use people's likeness without their permission or without
That is
paying them.
fascinating. How do they work
Yeah.
like
So
deceased actors then? Like we've seen with Grand Moff Tarkin in Rogue
yeah,
One. Like how does that legally work then?
I think the permission to use the likeness goes to the estate. So I suppose relatives have to give written permission.
Okay, that's such an interesting law. I didn't know that, and the fact that it was influenced by this film, and I didn't actually realize that it wasn't the same actor. I thought it was the same guy. Maybe that's the success of the prosthetics in that part.
Well, they used a lot of techniques to make you not notice. So they would show them from a distance. They used footage from the original Back to the Future, having Crispin Glover in the 1955 role. But any scene set in 2015 is Jeffrey Wiseman, and they sort of give the excuse that he's pulled out his back, so he's hung upside
Yeah,
down, which is so you don't pay attention to his face.
that's so interesting, man. That's great. Where did you get this stuff? This is fascinating.
Well, I was aware of that, but just not in as explicit detail. So I listened to Do Go On's episode 11 on Back to the Future, and wrote down a few context points. I did know the vast majority of this, but say versions of the original script I wasn't fully aware of. So I took notes from that podcast just to sort of try and enrich the review a little bit.
That's fascinating. That might rival my favorite bit of film trivia since the Christian Bale's Terminator rant. That is so interesting.
Yeah, I find it really interesting, and I guess for modern actors in the 21st century, I assume it's just written in their contract that in the future, if they were to die, their likeness can be used.
Hmm. Yeah, man, that's fascinating because, like, I've never like I wasn't aware Back to the Future had impacted that rule, so that's really intriguing, man.
Yeah. So, did you want to leap into the review?
Let's do it, man. Let's do it.
So obviously, Crispin Glover does not appear in this film, but also who doesn't appear was the original actress who played Jennifer.
Yes.
So as you mentioned earlier, she was replaced by Elizabeth Shue, and I do not like her at all.
You know what it is, man? I think they do look really similar, but I after I finished the first film, I really enjoyed the ending, so I went on YouTube and like looked up the ending, and in the comments section, they were like, there, there's a lot of guys who well, I assume you guys, some could be girls, and they were like, oh, this is the Jennifer that I fell in love with. This is the way better Jennifer. This is the way hotter Jennifer in the first film. I was like, I thought they were the same person. They look so similar in my opinion.
I think when you put that like bouffant to hairstyle on anyone, they look the same.
Yeah,
But yeah, I was actually wondering because I thought that you probably just wouldn't notice. Like if you watched them days apart, I just thought you wouldn't
I
notice.
didn't notice. I didn't
Uh,
notice.
was it only when you went onto like Wikipedia that you
Yeah,
realized?
yeah, yeah. Like it just completely because I had watched Back to the Future one a few days ago, and then yesterday last night I watched Back to the Future two, so it was a few days in between. So
Yeah, and
completely passed me by.
yeah, I mean, especially if you've watched them 4 years apart, like most people would have done in the 80s,
Yeah.
I can very much understand why you wouldn't have noticed. But yeah, I just think that Elizabeth Shue's portrayal is a lot more whiny and annoying. But that's almost definitely down to the writing, rather than her performance. I just think that the original actress wasn't given much to do, but I really enjoyed what she did with it. So I guess it's probably just the script of this film that lets Jennifer down.
You know what it is, man? It's so interesting you say that, buddy, because the Marty and Jennifer romance is something that I think is really underrated in these films, particularly in the first film. I think it's really compelling, and like they actually seem really great for each other. They seem perfect for each other, and she seems so sweet as well. Like she seems so
In the
nice to
first
him.
film,
Yeah,
or
when she writes down her grandmother's house's phone number and says like "I love you," I thought it was quite a sweet thing to do.
yeah, she seems really supportive and sweet. And then I think this one's just like, oh, can we see? Like, does that mean we get married, Marty? Can we see our wedding? Can we see our wedding? What did I wear, Marty? What did you wear? Oh, and I'm like,
Oh, my future
yeah,
self! Ah.
yeah. No, I was like, please tase her, Doc Brown, and thankfully he knocked her right out.
You know,
Uh,
man, like it's
yeah, I
strange.
just can't picture the first film's Jennifer acting like that. Like, they just don't seem like the same character to me.
You know what it is, man? It's so strange because I actually prefer this film to the first one. I think this is even better than the first. But it's interesting because I think the Jennifer character is the one fault in it. Yeah,
Yeah, I would say that's the wide consensus that this is an improvement on the first film, but I think
I'm sensing
you'll
it's not
probably
your
see that
opinion.
I don't share that sentiment.
Fair enough, man. Fair enough. I can understand why. I can understand why.
Yeah, so we're immediately brought into the future of 2015. Well, this film's future, our past of 2015, and we see the new take on fashion. And what was unintentionally incredibly iconic were the self-lacing Nike sneakers,
Awesome.
which
Love him.
people desperately want now, and so do I. Quite honestly,
Yeah.
they are unbelievably cool. But what is not cool is the weird sort of like floaty like vacuum arms jacket.
You know that do you ever see those like huge big like uh blow up I want to say blow up dolls, but they are sort of like blow up dolls like outside like car dealerships where it's
Car
like
dealerships,
like
yeah, yeah,
floating. That's what it
yeah.
reminded me of.
And I think it's the Teletubbies has this weird character who's like part vacuum, and he has like a vacuum coming out of his face. But it's exactly like the arms of this jacket. Like it looks horrendous.
Man, you know what it is? I can understand why people would dislike this film more than the first one, just because our 2015 was so different and such a letdown compared to this 2015. This film completely overestimated the technological advancements between 85 and 2015. Like 2015 and 1985 are remarkably similar, I would imagine.
Yeah. I mean, Robert Zemeckis was concerned about sort of like overshooting, the advancements in technology, but I kind of understand it. It was still 30 years in the future. I do get it.
Yeah.
I don't blame this film, and I don't blame Blade Runner either, which is set in 2019. I think it's fair enough. It was far enough in the past that they just dreamed big. I get it. But
Yeah.
do you really think people are just bitter that their 2015 wasn't as good?
I wish 2015 was like this. Like I'd love floating cars and like clothes that dry themselves. That would be so much. And I actually think the Nike self-lacing boots they are cool. I would wear them. And I don't even like
Yeah,
Nike trainers usually, but they're
they
cool.
have actually produced, I think, like one or two pairs, and I think one of the pairs was given to Michael J. Fox, and he, to my memory, like auctioned them off. But I don't even know how you get the technology to do that, but obviously it's possible.
Yeah. And this film introduces the hoverboard, which is probably one of the more iconic aspects of this film franchise. But we are pretty close to hoverboards with like segways and stuff. They're sort of hoverboards, but with wheels, I suppose. But I can imagine hoverboards maybe existing in like a couple decades, right?
Yeah, people really endeavored to sort of catch up to the 2015 of this film just because it was so iconic. So by 2015, they had created a hoverboard of sorts, which had like specific magnets under it, and then it went over like a copper track. But obviously, that's not usable like on the street as
Yeah.
presented in this film. And yeah, I don't know if we'll ever get there, honestly.
I know, man. I know. Like I would say the most futuristic well, not necessarily invention. It's more of a reinvention. Is the new like Tesla car, which looks so futuristic, doesn't it? And maybe like everything Elon Musk doing, like he's basically our version of Tony Stark, pretty much. Like everything he's doing, like he's probably the closest we have to like a visionary, isn't he?
Yeah, I agree with you. Uh, so this is a future that you would want to live in.
In some instances, yes, because like it also seems like a pretty diverse society. Like the police force that we see, like they're both women and stuff, and that seems like pretty forward thinking, especially in today's climate. With all the criticism the police have received. So it does seem like a more diverse society, and it seems really colorful. But what about you?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, having the like Michael Jackson themed diner might be a bit dicey these
Yeah,
days.
well, yeah, that's
Uh,
a really good point.
but yeah, aside from that, pretty much with all the technical advances, I would enjoy to live there, I think.
Absolutely, man. The film has like a what does that? It has like an '80s bar, which I think is cool. Like I don't know if they exist in real life now, but I'd love like a '60s themed bar where it's like Beatles and Beach Boys everywhere. That would be so cool. Like we would go there regularly, I would imagine.
Yeah, the closest one is there's a 50s diner called Eddie Rockets in Belfast. Have you been there?
I've heard of it, but I actually didn't know it was '50s inspired.
Yeah, I think you'd enjoy it. It's sort of like it's basically like Pop Tate's diner from Riverdale.
Oh, cool, cool. We should go. Is it expensive or is it okay?
Not terribly, not terribly.
Because what's the one that's quite expensive? Is it Five Guys? I know we've gone off topic here, but is it Five Guys?
Five Guys is expensive, but like there's another diner called Maggie Mae's, which is also considered quite expensive. I think
The more you know, the more you know. But
we're not slating them, you know. We're just saying it's outside our means.
but yeah, any other points about sort of like the setting of the film? Because we see like in the background, like there's like a Jaws 19 out in 2015, which I think was quite funny. It's another Spielberg project, isn't it?
Yeah, it says that it's directed by I believe Max Spielberg, which is Steven Spielberg's real son.
Oh,
So
well, that's nice.
yeah, sort of an interesting call forward.
Yeah.
Did you have any comments of the events that take place in 2015 before we sort of like move back to 1985?
I just had a few points about like I love how the future feels. Like it feels like its own universe, but also I think it's a great combination of like the town of Hill Valley that we're so familiar with, but also like a combination of the future. And I just I really like sort of like even the hoverboard. It looks awesome, and the effects are marvelous even for the time. And I don't have any real points about the what we see in the future. No, I'm just happy to go by your notes, buddy.
Yeah, did you think that I recognize that it's an homage to the first film, but did you not think that the hoverboard chase was too similar to part one?
I don't know because I think it changes enough because it's on a hoverboard, not like a skateboard. But I can understand why it would feel cheap, and I think this film is filled with a lot of cheap things. Like there's a lot of really bad cheap exposition by Lorraine. I think at one point she says that automobile accident turned Marty's life in a downward spiral. That's just an
Yeah,
unnecessary detail that is clearly going to mean something, isn't it?
yeah. I mean, I think again, if you view this as a three-act film, like one film, I guess it's just acting as like a rule of three, and it's just enforcing like
Yeah,
these nods, to earlier in the film.
great point.
And if you look at it from that perspective, it's genius. But I think if you look at it as three separate films, it's repetitive.
Yeah, I agree, man. I agree. And there's one line, to be fair, that really did stick out to me, and it's when Doc Brown goes, I did not invent the time machine for financial gain, Marty. And I think that's a really inspired line, and it's really well said, and it goes quite understated, I think, because like I think I do believe Doc just did invent it for scientific curiosity, and we see Marty and especially Biff try to exploit that, and Biff succeeds in trying to exploit that. But I think it's really important that the overall message of the film is that like you create your own future. Like it's not about the money and stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Do you believe Doc though that he wasn't doing it for a bit of coin?
I don't know, because he seems pretty happy with his life already. Like his friendship with Marty and his lovable pet dog Einstein. Like he seems pretty happy, but you never know. Like with the old moolah, it's a tempting factor for many people, isn't it?
And I guess we find out by the third film that he eventually uses it for love. So I guess
Yeah, good point,
I
man.
mean,
Good
he's disrupting the course of history to find love. So I don't know whether that's
point.
morally questionable,
I know,
but
man. I know.
I'm glad that he does because Doc, I would say, is my favorite character in these films.
That's an interesting one. I think mine. I think mine is Biff. No, I'm not because of his actions, of course, but I think
He's
he's
obviously a terrible human being.
yeah. But like it's the same way. Like I'm trying to think of an example. Like my favorite character in Black Panther is Eric Killmonger, not because he's a good
Yeah,
person, but because I think he's really well characterized, and it's a sort of similar instance to this. Like he kind of reminds me of Kingpin from Daredevil in the sense that, like, well, I mean, he does become a Kingpin of sorts in his future. Like and by the way, I did not expect the film to go down like the alternate reality route, and I absolutely love that. And
yeah,
we'll get into it more. But no, Biff's probably my favorite character in this franchise, just because of how like left field he is. Like he just comes out of nowhere basically, and he's the villain of the film, so I love that. Love that man.
yeah. So to go into what you were saying about the alternative version of events that we see taking place in
Yeah.
1985, I think it's really strange that we hear people, constantly talking about, oh, this is the best part of Back to the Future Part Two. It's when they go into the future. But by far, my favorite part of the film is uh, is the dystopian version of 1985.
Yeah, man.
By far,
You know what it reminded me of? And please, like if you agree with me, let me know. But like, it reminded me of like The Dark Knight Returns in the sense that it's like Gotham and in this case Hill Valley. It's sort of like a barren wasteland of sorts where crime is like ridden the streets and the police are corrupt. And it kind of reminded me of like the mutant gang in The Dark Knight Returns Part One and Two, and how Biff has sort of like got his goons roaming around the streets of Gotham, or rather Hill Valley. Did you get that?
yeah, I didn't grasp that while I was watching it, but yeah, I definitely see that where some people are just going about their normal lives, like they're in
Rushing the
their homes,
streets.
but they have like gun belts and like huge shotguns,
Yeah, isn't it
and
like
they're just like
yeah, isn't
it's so weird, and I love it so much.
the principal's like shot at by a group of goons, isn't he? Like Strickland.
Yeah, I found that hilarious. I just wish they'd finish the job.
Yeah, man. You know what it is about I completely agree with what you said there, Callum, about like the alternate reality being your favorite, because like even the Biff documentary at his hotel called Biff's. Like it's so
Yes.
cheap. The exposition is so cheap, but it's so funny. Like in a sense that like it's like learn more about how Biff Tannen rose to fame through gambling and his sports, and he owns the hotel and he owns the town and he owns the police. I think that was hilarious.
Yeah, but I love that just for the sake of the fact that uh because the films were filmed back to back, part two and part three, they were able to call forward to Mad Dog Tannen,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
being
Good
being
point,
his
man.
descendant from Hill Valley.
Good point. Do
So
you think that was
I
always
just
their
love the
intention? Yeah.
interconnectivity of the films. Hmm?
Do you think that was all? I suppose it was always their intention then to recall Mad Dog Cannon for the third film. Yeah.
Yeah, the part two and part three were written alongside each other and then filmed right after each other. So yeah, they had the third film's script and plot completely in place.
That's
So yeah,
awesome.
Mad Dog was just an exceptional call forward, I
Oh
thought.
yeah, absolutely, man, absolutely.
And you sort of said that you found Biff to be quite like Kingpin from Daredevil, but I
Yeah.
actually found him more to be like Donald Trump, like a
Yeah,
more
there you go. Yeah.
like a caricaturish, more villainous Donald Trump.
Absolutely. And like even like in the hotel resemblance, you know, both own hotels, both are corrupt businessmen, and even like I don't know, I just love that whole alternate reality section. But the one if I were in Biff's situation, you know, like he probably should have killed Marty McFly and Doc Brown and not send Doc Brown to an insane asylum. He should have killed him. Should well, maybe he didn't know.
Yeah, he just said, he was told by old Biff, like an old scientist will come up to speak to you, or a kid. Like he didn't say who they were, because I guess Biff, I guess never knew Doc's name. So I
Yeah.
guess Doc was just jailed. Well, he was just put in an insane asylum for unrelated reasons.
That bit sort of goes a bit understated because it's never really revealed how Doc got out of that insane asylum. I would have liked to see that as well because, like, that sort of is an interesting subplot. I think.
Oh, I don't think he ever did. Like I think this like this 1985's version of Doc Brown. Oh, like even the timeline's a bit messy right now. Uh, in this alternate version of events, there is a 1985 like dystopian Marty. There's a 1985 dystopian Doc. That Doc is in a mental asylum. Marty is fuck knows. And now this like different version of 1985 Marty that we've been watching in the films has now planted himself in 1985, and Doc has planted himself in 1985, but the other versions of them still exist. So while their adventure in the dystopian 1985 is taking place, the Doc
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I get
Brown,
you.
the Doc Brown that has been established as being alive in this version of the continuity of events, is still in that mental asylum.
I get you. Okay, I get you now, buddy. I thought the film was going to complicate matters more by having it turn out that like Biff was Marty's dad, but like because
Yeah,
it sort of does present that, but then like I'm glad they didn't go down that route. You know what I mean?
yeah, I'm glad they didn't, because then I would have been confused as to why he still looks like George McFly. So
Yeah,
I was glad that they didn't go that way. But yeah,
absolutely, man.
just sort of when Leah Thompson, there, as you said, there is a lot of sort of cringy exposition. She's like, "But he's your father," and
Yeah, I think it works though. I
I
do
was
think
like,
it works, but
"Is he though?"
yeah, yeah, I know, man, I know, and like one thing I wanted, there's another great line. There's so many great lines in this film, and I can't remember who says this line, but oh no, I think it's Doc. So I think when Doc goes, I'm going to discover the other great mystery of the universe, women. I was like, brilliant, brilliant. What a line,
I
what a
don't even
line.
recall that, but yeah, fantastic.
But you know what it is, man. Like what? And one thing I didn't sort of pick up on, where was Jennifer during the Biff reality? Was she ever there, or if I just glossed over that and not acknowledged that?
I guess just in that dystopian version of events, because Marty's life went in a completely different direction. I guess he was just never in a relationship with Jennifer, and original Marty McFly that we've been watching through the films, from the original version of 1985. I guess only cares about fixing the events, so he isn't really concerned about what with this version of Jennifer's doing, because if he's successful in his mission, she'll have never existed. So I
Yeah,
guess it's just that
it's a
they're
good.
unconcerned about interacting with her.
So that's a great point, mate. I like that. I like that a lot.
Right. So we see that Biff, as you said, used the time machine to become successful through gambling. And I understand that Biff wants to be the most rich, famous, and important man on earth. But why would he want that world to be a shithole? And like, why would he want to continue to live in that small town? Like, surely if he can, if he has enough wealth and influence to, like, change the world, why does he want the world that he rules over to be terrible? Like, why would he
Yeah,
want crime in the streets? Why would he want, all this, like immorality? Why,
it's a
like,
great
why,
point.
why wouldn't he want a great, utopia society that he happens to be the ruler of?
It's a great point. And it sort of reminds me, like, I think Biff in this, I know, like, I know I'm talking about Biff as if he's a real person, but I think Biff, he definitely should. I know he has made sure that he's careful about gambling, but like, I don't know if he's smart enough to make sure that it doesn't look like he's cheating the gambling in some way. Because if he's winning like every important, like high stakes, high return gambling opportunity, it's going to look pretty suspicious. Like, why is no one calling him out on this? Like, he's won another like unsuccessful bet, and he's gained millions through gambling. So like he obviously was pretty careful, I suppose, about choosing the right sports events to pick, because it's never really revealed how wealthy he is. But I assume he's like nearly like at the billions, I'd imagine, like a Trump level.
Yeah, but also we see in the documentary, like you see Marty watching watching like the brief synopsis of the documentary for Biff, and like Marty looks at it hard, and you see the sports almanac in one of the photos
Yeah.
that says like sports almanac 1950 to 2000. So I think that in itself looks a bit suspicious.
Absolutely, man, absolutely. But like, let's be, if you saw, if let's say Biff existed in 2020, and you saw in a photo of Biff a sports almanac from like 2000 until 2050, would you think he was a time traveler, or like, because it's hard to say. Like, you probably would start to question that, wouldn't you?
I mean, if I saw a picture of someone years ago who had used who had gotten their wealth seemingly out of nowhere,
Yeah.
and that was somehow evidence of how they've done it, maybe I would question it. But I think if I just saw someone with something that says 2000 to 2050, I'd be like, well, that's obviously bullshit.
Yeah,
But if it
yeah,
actually
yeah.
informed their ability to make their fortune that has no other explanation, I guess maybe I
Totally.
would question it.
Yeah, that's a great point, man. That's a really great point. Like, I just I have a bit of a hot take about the film, right?
Sure.
I would argue that Biff is the main character of the film and gets a lot of screen time, especially towards the end, because the film sort of follows a young Biff's perspective from 1955. I would argue from that sort of moment on. What do you think?
Yeah, because I guess the filmmakers were obviously they were pressured into making this film, so they sort of wanted to show the events of the first film from a different perspective.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of it is Biff focused, and yeah, I hadn't really thought about it like that, but I do agree with you. For the vast majority of the film, he is sort of presented as the main character.
I think it's refreshing, buddy, to be honest. I think it's really refreshing.
It's really weird.
It is weird.
Uh,
It is weird.
yeah, I hadn't thought about it like that, but yeah, that is really weird. Uh, and we see in those scenes that Marty is going along on the ride with Biff because he is desperately trying to get the sports almanac back. And to his knowledge, when Strickland uh, confiscates said sports almanac and puts it on his desk, Strickland's just sitting around and like having a full mug of what seems like whiskey or something, and then like accidentally crushes Marty's hand. If I were Marty, I would have just savagely beaten the shit out of Strickland and stolen it. Because I mean,
Yeah.
you know, like don't kill
Savagely
him,
beaten.
sure. Well, I mean, like he's meant to get the sports almanac back at like uh, what's the phrase like uh, get it back at any cost. So
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, yeah.
you would just beat up Strickland because that's not going to have too bad a ripple effect because he kind
Yeah.
of seems like a nothing person in society. So I mean, just beat him up, take the sports almanac. Like he's doing this like weird stealth mission as though Strickland's going to recognize him. At
Yeah.
that point, he's not even a student in
Yeah.
Hill Valley High. So I mean, just beat him up and steal it.
Doc's just like, okay, Marty, dress conspicuously, and he's like, leather jacket, bowler cap, shades. It's conspicuous.
Yeah, it's the most like suspicious flasher outfit I've ever seen, which is obviously the comedy of the
Yeah.
film. But I mean, isn't Marty self-aware enough like to realize that?
Man, my favorite moment of this entire saga is when a young Biff just walks through like a group of boys playing with a ball, and he just takes the ball and just throws it as high as he can on top of a roof. And I think that is absolutely hilarious.
Because what I thought they were going to do in that scene, I thought they were going to give him a redemptive arc where they show the scenes from his perspective and he's actually behind closed doors a good guy. I mean,
Okay,
obviously
yeah,
that
yeah. It's
giving
interesting,
him a
man.
redemptive arc does not change the horrific acts
That's really
that he
interesting, buddy.
does
Yeah.
cause. But I thought that they were sort of going to make that baffling decision, and I'm glad they didn't because they shouldn't try to excuse his future behavior with a tortured past or whatever
Yeah.
because I don't think that's those actions aren't excusable.
That's a really interesting point, Callum. Actually, yeah, like for me, like at this point of the film, Biff does certainly become the main character, and like there is a lot of scenes where you question Biff's capability as a human. Like he can't hear or see Marty in the back of his car, even as their own peripheral vision or anything. I suppose I can understand that to a certain extent, but like one thing I really do love about the film is how like Biff calmly stalks his prey by revving the car at Marty rather than just absolutely plowing through it.
Yeah, he just like that bit of flair, that bit of jazz hands, you know.
Yeah, man, I do like Biff though. Not as a person, but as a character.
Again, not as a person, but as a
Yeah.
character, yes. Uh, so we see, you know, sort of a motif throughout the three films uh, is Marty being challenged by other people by being called a
Oh.
chicken, or you know, the time related equivalent of a chicken. And honestly, I don't think that's fair. They should just call him a dumb fucking idiot. Because you know, because of the fact of how triggered he gets by being called uh, a chicken. I mean, clearly he just has an incredible inferiority complex that he needs to sort out.
A
Like, who
fragile
gets
ego.
that? Who gets? Yeah, he has the most fragile ego I've ever seen. Like, he literally ruins lives by like pursuing fights just because they've called him a wimp. You know,
Yeah.
he's not even meant to be in that time period. So like, what does he care what those people think of him? It's
Yeah.
just
I
ridiculous. Like,
suppose.
that's the one reason I don't like Marty, because he's just such a fragile, like as you said, has such a fragile ego that, you know, his dad was sort of insecure and he was scared, but Marty is like the opposite. Well,
Yeah.
no, clearly he is scared of the situations but doesn't want to accept it, so he gets himself and other people into trouble, which is why
Yeah.
I don't like him in this film especially.
Fair enough. And in Marty's defense, I suppose from the filmmaker's point of view, they wanted to present like a hot-headed teen, but maybe they probably do go too far with that. Granted, yeah. And I suppose even in the original timeline, like he fucks up his own life by getting into that car accident we see in the third film, I think. So, like it's an interesting one, man. It probably does take it a step too far, though, doesn't it?
Yeah, another way in which he takes it a step too far is towards the end of the film when they're trying to get the sports almanac back from Biff. He said, "Let's just land the DeLorean on him and crush him." He literally wants to murder Biff just to get the sports almanac back. Like, he doesn't recognize, oh, he just did a horrific and illegal act. Let's kill him. That would be, you know, almost justifiable. I mean, it would be justifiable, you know, by the context of this film. He's acting as like the Punisher of this franchise, but
Yeah.
he's like, he has a sports almanac. Let's kill him.
Let's
You know, it's just the complete wrong motivation to do it.
completely like you can understand maybe because well you definitely can understand if you want to kill him because of what he did to his mother, but like yeah I
But
mean
that's absolutely not the motivation. He's like,
yeah
look,
yeah
he has
yeah
the
no.
sports almanac. Let's kill him.
Marty. Any other concluding points for me, buddy?
Oh, I have a lot more.
Go for it, man.
I
Go
think
for
this is probably going to be our longest episode yet, because we've been recording for like an hour and 40 minutes, and we're only on number two.
it. Go for it, man. Go for it.
Yeah. So Doc keeps talking about not affecting time and not letting people know the future. When he's in the present of 1985, the future is only a possible future. So by bringing Marty into the future in a time machine, he's recklessly endangering Marty. Uh, Going into the future, I don't even know what. Like, the reason that this makes no sense is because the film doesn't, you know, take the time to explain it. But basically, you know, it's reckless of Doc, who says that they shouldn't try and change time, to just carelessly go
Yeah,
into the
I agree.
future with no real need, because they clearly could have just gone, you know, if he's going to change Marty's life and change Marty's kids, if that's actually Doc's concern, why doesn't he just go weeks into the future and stop Marty from getting in the car accident? Because then that changes the
Yeah,
entire course of his life.
completely,
Why
man.
does he take Marty, you know, 30 like 30 years into the future to change something that happens, you know, a few days after that? Like, why wouldn't you go a few days into the future to change all of the rest of history? Like,
Completely,
it's just
buddy.
baffling to me.
What's Doc
Like,
even doing in 2015 to discover that Marty's kids are like, well, Marty's kid are is like in jail? Like he didn't even he just robbed a place, didn't he? Like his life's not over.
what do you mean?
Like from the like what's Doc doing in 2015 when he realizes that Marty's kids are in trouble or with the law? But also, didn't Marty's kid like Doc presents it as like it's a life or death scenario? But didn't Marty's kid just rob a place, or did he kill someone?
Yeah, like it seems he was just involved in a theft and is for theft for some reason given 15 years in prison, which is quite
Yeah,
excessive when murder is like 25.
yeah,
I think 15 for, I mean, perhaps it was armed robbery or violent of some reason,
maybe,
of
maybe.
some,
I do agree with
you
you. Like,
know,
I did, it's,
regard.
Doc is probably been a bit irresponsible by bringing Marty into the future rather than he could,
Yeah,
as you said, he could have just saved him from the car accident.
but yeah, Doc in 2015, I guess he's there because in the first film he thinks he's basically too good to be in 1985, so he has to be in the future to keep up with, like, he thinks he's so far ahead. I mean, I guess in regards to time travel, he's
Yeah,
further ahead than anyone has ever been.
yeah,
But he believes that he's so technologically advanced, he needs to be in the future because the present is no place for him.
yeah.
But
No, that's a great point, man. That's
well,
a
like,
really good point.
why are you going into the future to change the further future? It's all hypothetical. Change the present so you can change the
Yeah,
future.
yeah, yeah,
Like, it's just baffling to me.
yeah. That's a that's a really great point, man. Actually, and I never actually considered that.
So I'm just gonna be silent for a second while
No worries.
see if it loads. Yeah.
What
Okay.
page are you on
So
now?
uh, I cut this out definitely, but
No
like
worries.
I'm on page one, two. I'm finishing like page 3 of 5.
Not bad, not bad, not bad.
Yeah. So
Go for it, man.
so this film is widely regarded as superior to the original, but you know, I think because the series is so interconnected, as we've said, it's simply a continuation of the first film. So I think as the second act of a 6 hour film, it's spectacular. But I feel like had I waited 4 years to watch this film, uh, I would have just seen it as like sort of a tired string of callbacks. So I really
Okay.
don't think it's definitely not as original as the first film. And I think quality wise, it's pretty much just on par, if not marginally not as good. What are your views?
It's hard to say because it, it seems like the goal of the filmmakers wasn't to make it a 6 hour movie originally, considering there was a 4 hour gap between the first and the second film. But for me, because I watched them almost consecutively, or rather like 2 days between, which isn't obviously 4 years, I preferred it to the first one, and this is my favorite film out of the three, just because I think it deals with in some ways it is similar, but in some ways I think the alternate reality presented is just so amazing. I think that probably brings it above the first film for me. And we'll get into the third film and how different it is from these two. But I think because it's a continuation, I preferred it.
Yeah, I like. I think that watching them back to back is definitely the best viewing experience
Yeah,
of these films
completely, man.
because seen as a 6 hour movie, it's a masterpiece. It's one of the,
Completely, man.
like, if you consider it one film, it's one of the best films ever made. So yeah, I don't think the best way to watch these films is separated.
Yeah,
Uh,
completely,
because
man.
I think it does lessen its quality if you do wait 4 years. But
Definitely.
Steven Spielberg actually is not a huge fan of this film. He sort of compared. He said that this was like the blip in the trilogy. He considers it the worst of the three, which
Really?
I was surprised to hear because critically, this one is widely considered the one of the best sequels of all time. I would say this and Terminator Judgment Day are probably considered the two best sequels that are considered to rival their originals. Whilst I disagree with both of those.
Yeah. Yeah, man, that's interesting because I saw in the Wikipedia for this film, apparently it received mixed reviews upon release, but then over the years it garnered support from the fan base and it turned into a cult classic of a sequel in a sort of like a similar vein to how I suppose Terminator 2 did. But like it is interesting. I think this movie does improve on the second, but I can acknowledge how it would be very hit or miss for some people. It's a sort of similar instance to like our it's sort of like a similar instance with like our relationship and our thoughts on like Spider-Man 2. Like you believe that the first one is superior, where I believe the second one. So it's a mixed bag in that regard, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, but I do think if you watch these as standalone films, the second one is too similar and
Fair
too
enough. Yeah,
repetitive of themes. They go back into the same scenes. In fact, sometimes just showing full
yeah,
scenes from the first film. So I don't think it's as rewarding a viewing experience if you're watching it years apart.
sure. I respect that, Mac. I completely agree.
Yeah.
Actually, I completely agree.
Yeah, yeah. Did you have any final thoughts before going into ratings?
Um, I wanted to mention sort of the weird. I really love the ending where the DeLorean is like struck by lightning. I thought that was really well done. It looked great as well. And so I it sort of again I know I'm bringing up Endgame again, but the ending where Marty receives a letter from the courier, it did remind me of like the Sam Wilson and Steve Rogers sort of ending in Endgame, where like for Steve it's been years, and I thought the film was going to go down the route where, well, I mean, it did, I suppose, went with Doc's death, but I would rather, like, as I said, they just killed off Doc completely. But I am glad he's alive, I suppose, in some instances. But I thought the ending was marvelous, and
I guess.
I guess, but I thought the ending was marvelous, and it was accompanied by like a weird part three trailer in my own. Did he also have that?
Yeah, no, I hated that. I have no idea why that was there. I did not want to see any of that. I imagine that was present in, the theatrical release just because they filmed them back to back.
Can you imagine, mate, if you were someone who didn't like watching trailers and had to view that?
I mean, back in the day, obviously they're called trailers for a reason. They would actually play after the film, rather than before. So I think seeing a trailer for the sequel wouldn't have been, uh, if they were filmed, simultaneously or back to back, as in the case of these films. I think that would have been seen as normal, for the
Fair
time.
enough.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
sure.
seeing that in my copy of the film was quite jarring.
Yeah, man. Well, listen, did you want to head into ratings, bro? Because I'm really interested to hear what you had to say.
Sure, I'll go ahead. So I love the film in almost every regard, uh, but I would say that there's almost no improvements. It's pretty much quite similar to the first film, and some of the callbacks are a bit tired
Sure,
unless you've watched them unless you've watched them simultaneously. As in back to back, sort of shotgunning the three movies in one.
sure.
So I think looking at it from an outside perspective and how it was intended to be watched and released, I think I would have had bigger problems with it. So I really enjoyed watching it, but I don't think I would have enjoyed it as a viewer in 1989. Uh, I think it's missing the magic of Crispin Glover from the first film because I think he was probably one of my absolute favorite characters in the first film, and I think this is somewhat missing him. Whilst the story does cleverly maneuver around the fact that he's not there, with him having been murdered in the 70s
Yeah.
in the newly established 1985 timeline. So I pretty much love everything in this film. I just think there are some aspects that miss the mark. So I have to give it a 9.5 out of 10.
Yeah, I thought that was really great, Callum. And it is interesting, like how different perspectives can affect our enjoyment of the film because, like, I 100% agree with you. I think it is how you watch it, whether you watch it as a 6 hour movie, pretty much, or watch it individually. It does affect how you view it completely. And I don't think there's any film in history where it's like that for me. And maybe that's because I haven't watched that many movies, but I can't think of an example. Can you?
I guess the original Star Wars trilogy is best viewed,
Oh, yeah.
back to back, but also there are months or years in between those films. Whereas this film, or whereas these films, they all three films take place over a week or 2 weeks. It's kind of hard to gauge how many days he spends in each timeline.
Sure.
But, it probably takes place over you know 2.5, 3 weeks at most. So it is best viewed back to back, I think, because there's no time jump in between films.
Yeah, man, that's great. And I don't know. I think for me, I 100% relate to all your points, and I think there is definitely things, and it definitely does miss Crispin Glover. But for me, I preferred it more as a film, and I'd probably give it well, I have to give it a 10 out of 10. I loved it. So far, 20 out of 20 for me, and what is it, 20, no, 19.5 out of 20 for you. Like
Yeah.
this is a pretty great set of films, and I suppose we're heading into the more controversial or critically mixed bag in Back to the Future Part 3.
Well, upon initial release, it was actually much better received than Part Two. I suppose, in part for its incredible originality, because it's nothing like the first film,
Mhm.
which is probably why I respect it, to a higher degree than, the second film. And I think you'll probably be surprised at how much, I enjoyed this film.
That's great, man. Do you mind if I pause this just to get a drink and a bathroom stop?
Yeah, sure, I'll do that as well.
No worries, man.
Right. So as you said, this is probably at least by modern standard. Fuck my life. I'll start that again. at least by modern standards, I would say this is probably considered the least strong of the trilogy. And I definitely I have to disagree. Not to sort of like show all my cards from the start, but I mean it's exceptionally original. Far more than the second film, which is why it was probably received critically better than the second upon release. And I just love every part of it. I really expected to not enjoy it because I've never enjoyed a western before, and I guess it's probably the fact that this is a western infused with a sci-fi undercurrent, with them trying to return with a time machine, obviously. But at its heart, it's a western with Marty as the hero against the outlaw of Mad Dog Tannen. So I was just really surprised that I enjoyed this as much as I did. How did you find the experience?
Yeah, man, I agree. It sort of redefines the genre and the universe in which it's set in to a certain extent by having like a Wild West theme. And I suppose that, as you said perfectly, Callum, like it's sort of the sci-fi undercurrent with the Western theme. It's sort of similar to like Westworld, I would imagine, or something like that, or Logan maybe
Yeah,
as well.
definitely.
And I really like that, and I just love the connections between all three films and how they pick up right from the last one left off. And no, I don't know. I just think this is a really great film, and I think it's great. Yeah, loved it.
Yeah. So at the beginning of the film, Marty has to locate the doc from 1955 to help him go back to 1885.
Yeah,
There's so many timelines in this franchise, but it handles time travel
the
so
whole
well.
ending in five.
So yeah, definitely. So in 1955, they discover Doc's grave, and that is just batshit crazy luck that they were able to do that. Is it maybe because his dog sensed his master? Like, is,
Maybe.
is that is that meant to be it? That when he went for a piss, it was on his master's grave.
Yeah. You know what it is? Do many tombstones have the reason why people were killed on on the tombstone?
Not usually, and like it literally states his murderer, but they're like, but he didn't get arrested. Whoops! Like yeah, it's
Over
sort of
80 bucks.
it's
Yeah.
quite baffling.
Yeah, man. And I thought that was a really cool opening because it was kind of dark, and maybe it's my inner need for Doc to die, but I did like that.
You are clearly desperate for it. I
I do
mean,
like
you
Doc.
got
I do like Doc.
you got the murder fulfillment surely from the first film where he's gunned down by Libyan terrorists.
Sure. Oh
Was that
yeah.
was that not was
Yeah.
that not enough for you? You're like,
Wasn't
no, I
enough.
want a definitive death. He
Wasn't
needs to
enough.
die in all timelines.
You know what it is, man? It got me thinking about like I suppose the comedian and rapper Doc Brown is probably called Doc Brown because of the character.
Yeah, because I don't believe either. If I don't believe his surname is Brown, so
Yeah.
that's completely made up persona as a
Yeah.
name. So yeah, perhaps it is a reference to this. And this film pretty much told me that I clearly know nothing about like pre 20th century American history because I had no idea that what's called the Old West, what was taking place in this time period. I had no idea it was the
Yeah, I
1800s.
I'm exactly the same. I thought 1885 was sort of like the like industrial sort of realm of America, not like cowboys and Indians. That is not what I expected it to be at all. Like I was expecting like Wild West to be like 1700s sort of thing, 1600s.
Yeah, I guess I should have just thought about the fact that if they're carrying handguns, clearly the gun has been around for a long time. But
Yeah,
I don't know, just in my mind, it just took place in this completely anachronistic
I,
time that I
I, I'm the
just
same
never
man
even thought about
completely.
what year it was. I was just like, oh, it was just the Old West. Like that's the time period I give it to in my brain. I never thought it took place in this period of years. So
Yeah.
that was kind of a shocking revelation, honestly.
Hey, man, I assume this film like calls back or has recurring gags about actual westerns, like like the good, the bad, the ugly, and stuff like that. But I haven't actually seen them, so I don't know if it does or not. I assume it does. Even like Marty calls himself Clint Eastwood, which is funny. But I don't know. Do you know
Yeah,
if it does?
well, I suppose that was probably the most overt reference that I got, and then sort of connected to part two, we see that Biff was watching in his hot tub with his two hooker friends. He was watching, sorry,
All
sex
naked.
worker. Yeah, he was watching a western, and they used like the bulletproof plate, to get shot with, which is what Marty eventually uses
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
in the
It's a good
third
point.
act.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a bit of a rant for me here, and then
Okay,
an explanation because I thought that they just weren't going to address this, but they have since addressed this.
go for it.
And I don't know whether you picked up on this, but I'll just go for it. So it's fair enough that Marty's great great grandfather Seamus looks like him. That's well, I mean, it sort of suspends it. I have to suspend my disbelief, but that's fair. He looks like him. That's fine. But these people have no relation to Lorraine Baines, Marty's mother. So I guess it's just by absolute coincidence that George married someone who happens to look like his great grandmother.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting because both are played. Like, I assume Seamus is played by Michael J. Fox,
Yeah, yeah,
and then his grandmother, Seamus's wife, is played by the same person who plays Lorraine.
yeah. So sorry, I was being called. No worries.
Okay, you're right.
But so Lorraine is played by Leah Thompson, who also plays Seamus's wife Maggie. But
Okay.
the family line that includes Seamus and Maggie is Marty's paternal line, so that's his dad's relations. So Maggie has no relationship to Lorraine, but is still played by Leah Thompson.
Maybe they
Uh,
like similar women.
yeah, see, this is the thing. So I originally wrote, is this incest? Uh, is it a weird occurrence of them secretly being cousins? Like I was seriously thinking about this because when something isn't answered in a film, we sort of create our own head canon where we
Sure.
answer the questions for ourselves,
Good
and
point.
because there isn't an answer in the film, we can just make up whatever answers we want.
Sure.
So in my mind, there is this sort of continuing the weird incest storyline that we've seen in the first
Yeah.
film. I think it's fairly consistent to keep
Yeah.
that in this film. So in my mind, that's what it is. But the writer of the film has since said that McFly women are just uh, biologically what was the phrasing?
Like, I think
Sorry,
biologically to be in.
they're genetically predisposed to being attracted to women who look like Leah Thompson. That's basically their explanation.
I can
But that
understand that.
but that still means that when George McFly looks back on old photos of his family and sees his great grandmother, he's thinking, oh, what a babe. Like that still makes me upset.
Yeah, and then like Marty is probably thinking the same about his own mother then.
I guess it's just
So
baffling.
it is sort of the same thing. Like women go for boys who are like their dads, and guys go for girls who are like their mothers, or like guys can go for guys who are like their dad or whatever. Like it's sort of, do you know what I mean? Like people go for their suitor based on their parents. Do you know what I mean?
I mean that's the theory.
Yeah.
I don't believe that. I don't think that's true.
Yeah,
Uh,
I disagree with it as well. But I suppose it's that what the director sort of saying. Like the McFly family are attracted to people who look like
to
Leah
other
Thompson.
members of the McFly family, I guess. Yeah, I mean, I guess they just desperately wanted, to have Leah Thompson be consistent throughout the films. They
I
wanted her
respect
to be
that.
in every film, so that they found a way to sort of shoehorn her into this. And then I guess they had to retroactively explain that because they didn't realize, I guess,
Yeah.
that the sort of messy family history they were creating there.
So
So I think they had to backtrack and say that
yeah,
just to appease people.
Marty's looking at Jennifer and thinking, "You look like my great grandmother." I like that.
Uh, uh, It's like,
Gross.
can you speak in an Irish accent?
Yeah, I suppose that is sort of realistic because a lot of people in America have like Irish heritage, don't
Yeah, and they were, yes.
they?
Uh, in summary, yes.
Yes.
Uh, right. So soon after we're introduced to his extended family, we also meet Mad Dog Tannen,
Yeah.
played once again by Tom Wilson. And I've never heard of someone being mocked for having teeth that are too good. Like they go, look at these pearly whites. I'm like,
Yeah. Where
is
do you
is
get
that
them
something to be
from?
ashamed of? Yeah, I mean, yeah, it just confuses me. And
Yeah.
equally, something that confused me was like, why would he not want Mad Dog as a nickname? It's the best one you can have.
I know, I know. Like, if Riverdale season 3 is anything to go by, you want to be called Mad Dog. And also, like,
Like,
why does he get? Why does Marty? And I know maybe they don't have the cleanest water, but why does Marty get made fun of for asking for like some water in a bar? Like surely,
Yeah,
in all that town they have at least a form of water. Like we see the McFly family do. So why doesn't the saloon?
yeah. I don't think it's not. I don't think it's that they didn't have it. I think that they just thought he was like a wimp for going into a bar and asking for water. But then they pour him whiskey, and I'm like, well, you can't expect him to pay for that. He didn't ask for it.
I know, man. I know. It kind of reminded me of like, have you seen Rango?
I'm aware of it.
Yeah, like there's a scene where the character goes into a bar and like asks for some water. I think it is parodied probably from this scene actually because both are westerns. But like he goes in for water and then gets some like cactus juice. So it is. It's actually now I think about it, it is directly parodied in this. But yeah, no, I thought it was interesting, man. I thought it was quite funny because all those guys in the bar are just like taking the piss out of our Marty, and I wasn't for having it.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm just wondering, why is Marty such a cockblock in this film?
Yeah,
Like
I actually
he
really like.
desperately wants, he clearly desperately wants Doc to be alone.
Doc and Claire's relationship I thought was really well done.
Oh yeah, I loved it so much, and because they've saved her from death. You know, in their original 1985 timeline, she died on that day. So
Yeah.
by leaving her in 1885, they're actually changing the timeline. So they should have realized very early on that by bringing her into the present, they're actually solving all of their problems because she's assumed dead, and they've brought her into the future, and Doc gets to continue uh, to date her and then eventually marry her. So
Yeah.
I mean, I guess they're just both in this film too dumb to realize that that's actually the best way to do it.
Yeah, there was one particular line that I thought was really heartfelt when Doc says like traveling through time has become too painful, and that resonated with me because I thought it was a really deep thing to say because like the character of Doc, he doesn't have that many like he's sort of like a characterized as the mad scientist throughout the first two films, so I like to see that other layer in this one.
You're like, but also I hope he dies. You're like, I'm desperate to see
No, I
death.
do like Doc. I think Doc's probably the most consistent character throughout the three films.
Were you hoping that he just like fell in front of the train at the end?
Yeah, you know what it is. I would have sort of preferred like him to stay in 1885 and be happy there.
Well, he does.
I suppose he does, but the fact that he has like a steam train time machine, I thought ruined it for me.
Yeah, we'll go on to that definitely. But I'm just wondering, how did the Tannins ever have children? Because they're all disgusting.
Like Biff's a pretty handsome man, I'll give him that.
But they're all the worst.
Like, yeah, yeah. It's a great point. That's a great point. Like, what? Yeah, and I have a question. Like, why doesn't anyone in Hill Valley just blow Mad Dog Tannen's brains out? Like, where's the sheriff?
Yeah, we see the sheriff, and he's actually the ancestor of Principal Strickland. Uh,
Yeah.
but he's obviously not very good at his job because he just sort of this stranger Clint Eastwood shows up in the town, and they just expect him to sort it out. They're like, oh yeah, we're so glad a hero has come around to help us with Mad Dog Tannen. But I mean, he doesn't seem like a formidable foe. He's just any other outlaw in that Western society. So I mean, yeah, just kill him or arrest him as easy as you have with all the other criminals.
Yeah, man. Like I tell you what, though, see when they started to hang Marty, I thought that was a very dark turn for a kids film.
Yeah, and obviously in real life, that they actually did hang Michael J. Fox, and he did nearly die. Like that's one of the
Seriously?
worst instances of like an onset disaster. Like
Oh
he
my,
he was
really?
yeah, like he suffered like really badly, as a
Wow.
result of that.
I didn't know that, man. That's terrible.
Yeah, Back to the Future had some huge incidents. Like I didn't mention it, but I don't know the full details of this, but the hoverboard chase in part two,
Yeah.
where sort of like griffs, like goons are all thrown through like the city hall, and like one hits the pillar and like some go through the glass.
Yeah.
Like one or more of them like was like grievously injured as a
Wow.
result of that. Like it was
That's
a complete
crazy, man.
disaster.
That's crazy, buddy. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess they probably should have pumped more of the budget into safety precautions.
You'd think so. You'd think so.
Yeah, I just need to find where stopped.
No worries, man. No
Yes,
worries.
so uh, Yeah, once again, we see Marty's inferiority complex and fragile ego ruin people's lives because this entire film doesn't happen if he just isn't such a like stupid dickhead. If he just accepts the fact that like these words mean nothing. Because
Oh,
they're not even that
great point.
insulting. They're saying, "Oh, you're such a wimp because you don't want to be in a gunfight." Like that's not like that. That wouldn't offend me if someone said, "Callum, you're too much of a chicken to be in a gunfight." I'd be like, "Yeah, like
Obviously.
why aren't you?" If someone was bullying me, that's a different thing because like
Yeah,
if they're bullying you for your looks or your personality or your behavior, that is obviously bad for your mental health. But if someone says that you're a chicken for not doing something that's ridiculously dangerous, you're just an idiot for like entertaining
absolutely.
them.
Absolutely, man. Like I
So
I
so like
wouldn't be
I
the
think
first
that
one
I
to,
think that Marty is fully condemnable in this film.
yeah, I wouldn't be the first one to jump in for a gunfight. Like it's not on my bucket list, you know?
Yeah, I'm not pumped to do that. I'll be honest. And just Marty's stupidity is just what causes these films to happen. And
Yeah,
I guess that's fine. I guess
yeah, I guess.
because I
One
mean
thing,
his stupidity creates the stories that I loved so much. So
yeah, yeah,
that's
true.
fine, I guess. But it annoys me when he ruins other people's lives. Like the fact that Doc nearly doesn't get to spend his life with Clara just because like Marty wasted too much time, trying to fight Mad Dog.
Yeah, that's a great point, man. That's a great point. One thing I wanted to commend the film about was like how well shot it is, and there's particularly one shot that stood out to me. It's when like Clara is in like a purple dress and she's standing at the train station and the train is coming in the foreground. I thought that was such a great shot. It really went underrated. I don't know if you noticed that. And also when the camera pans in and has like a Fast and Furious style like intense car chase where it like follows the horse's hooves. I thought that was marvelous. Really well done.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Sort of turning quite far away from that.
Alright.
I was just wondering how you rate the Irish accents that are seen in this film.
They're probably better than my Irish accent, but just recast the characters. Just get Irish actors. You know.
Yeah, I guess it's just for like the fun corniness of having Michael J. Fox and Leah Thompson, play their parts so often, and their relations.
You know what it
I
is
have
about
to say, Michael J. Fox's is pretty good.
it's pretty good. And you know what it is about Michael J. Fox? And this is no disrespect to him whatsoever because he's a fantastic actor. But I think he can play a 1980s kid. Like he can play an 18-year-old just as well as he can play like a guy in his mid 30s. I don't know whether it's something about his look. Like he looks really
Yeah,
young, but like he
no,
also
he
looks
he
middle aged
looks
at the same
he looks
time.
45 years old. He
Yeah.
looks 45 years old, and I don't know. He must have been in his early 20s or something. But yeah, he looks a lot older than he is.
Yeah, but he looks so young now. Like he looks really well for like mid 60s, I'd imagine he is. Or early
Yeah, so
60s.
he sort of like aged very early on and then stopped for a while, which I
Yeah.
guess it's kind of the best way to be if you're living in America and you're trying to get
Oh yeah.
into bars and stuff. I'm sure it's better that
Yeah.
you look a bit older than you are.
It's a great point, bud. It's a great point.
Right. So I have written that like Marty and Jennifer's relationship is garbage in comparison to Doc and Clara. I don't know. I just felt such a warm connection. I think it's Christopher Lloyd carrying it just because of how enthusiastic he is, and he seems like he's never had a relationship before. I don't know. He just seemed like this wide-eyed, innocent character who's never felt love before.
I love
And
that.
even though Marty's like 17, but it still feels like he's like I don't know. He has like this. Like he always says that he loves Jennifer and he's committed to Jennifer, but I don't know. He has this some sort of like fuckboy
I
energy,
agree.
but
I agree. He sort of I
but
thought he'd
but
be a
but
jock,
but
but he's not a jock, but he sort of gives that energy, doesn't he?
yeah, but Doc's completely different. Like he has this innocent energy that I just made me fall in love with his relationship.
Absolutely. And I think because Clara really understands him, that's what's so nice about it. And one thing I want about Christopher Lloyd, speaking of aging well, like that guy, he looks exactly the same now as he did in like 1985, pretty much.
Yeah, but I guess
How
that's like
old was he in
like he
1985 or
in
1990?
1985 he was like 50. So
Wow.
he looks like 70 here, and now he looks about 80. Like he's 81 now, so he looks his age now, but he's always looked older than he was before.
Really? Like,
Well, I mean, what? So in 1985, that was 35 years ago. So he was
good
like,
point, actually. Yeah.
he was what, like 46, and he looks 75.
Do you think they added like makeup and prosthetics there? Or do you think he actually does? Yeah, I suppose he does look like he looks a lot older than he does, but he just has stopped aging since then.
You know, I think that is. I don't think they used any prosthetics. I think that's just how he looks because
Yeah,
he also looks the same in their portrayal of him in 1955. And
yeah,
surely, if they were using prosthetics in the 1985 version, the 1955 version would look any younger, but he doesn't.
yeah. I agree. That's a good
I
point.
kind of find it hilarious how they made no effort to make him look younger. Like they
Yeah,
didn't dye his hair or change anything about him. He just looks identical.
because in 1955, he's probably what, like 20 in his 20s or 30s, right?
I mean, it depends. Obviously, as I said, Christopher Lloyd. So the am I doing the maths on this right? So 35 years ago, he would have been 46.
Yeah,
Yeah. So he's 46 in real life, uh, and there's 30 years between. So
16.
I think he's meant to be like 40 in 1955 and like 70 in 1985.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense.
And then he's sort of in an age between those, so he kind of looks like both. So
Yeah,
that's probably where I would
good point.
hedge it at.
It's a good point.
I'm just looking.
No worries. But like, one thing about the film I think is really special about it is like I don't know, there's something really magical for me about steam trains. I just love. So maybe it's my nostalgia for the Thomas the Tank Engine franchise. I don't know. I just thought it was magical.
Okay, yeah, I agree with you. Like you don't often see that in a film made these days, and
Yeah, no.
even back in 1989, it was probably a rare sight to see sort of this western tone because I think a lot of the big westerns were probably made in the 50s to the 70s. So I think
Yeah.
89 was probably a relatively late addition for this kind of film, and
Yeah, man.
I really love seeing all of those old elements.
Absolutely, dude. Absolutely. We're
Do you
getting there.
cut out where I'm like rustling for paper? By the way,
I will cut out. Yeah, no worries.
have you before, or
I have
do
cut
you
out
just leave it
before,
in?
but there's
You
I
have cut
can
it.
I can guarantee you there's probably still bits in there where I've just kept it in or just glossed over it.
Okay.
I can edit this, but I can edit this, but I'll just time code it now in my notes. So how long have we gone for? 2.5 hours roughly. 2 hours 30. Edit out. Okay, cool.
I mean, it's gonna be just a solid 1 minute chunk of me being like, "Can you cut this out?" So like, yeah,
No
right.
worries.
So, in one of the final climactic scenes of the film, we finally see the shootout between Mad Dog and Marty, and like Thor, Mad Dog should have gone for the head.
Yeah, he should have gone for the head. You know what the thing? Like Marty's very lucky. Like he didn't like lower his aim or raise his aim because like that chest pit wasn't very big.
Yeah, I thought you meant he'd either go for like the face or the balls, but I guess yeah, even in the torso, he could have easily hit him somewhere else.
Yeah,
Uh, but yeah, I don't know why it's ever the intention of a bad guy to kill someone by shooting them in the chest. Because one, they're gonna die slower even if you hit them in the right place, and they could easily be wearing a bulletproof vest, which they always seem to be. Like
yeah.
in a
Especially
movie, they
Doc.
never kill
Yeah.
a person by hitting them in the chest.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, to be honest, this version of Biff in Mad Dog Cannon, he doesn't seem like the worst Biff that we've seen. Like he seems like a pretty nice guy. Like he gives Marty like a minute to decide his fate. He doesn't rush him. To be fair.
Yeah, he kind of seems like just a generic outlaw of the time. Like he doesn't seem like the worst guy. Uh, he reminded me a lot of Taserface from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume
Yeah,
Two
yeah, he
in
does actually.
in
Yeah,
voice and character. I don't know whether that's intentional, but he does seem exceptionally similar to me.
I agree. Even like
Uh,
all his goons and stuff, it's sort of similar to Taserface.
yes. So obviously this is the final film of the franchise, so it wants to have Marty learn the ultimate lesson that he, should recognize that, people calling him a chicken doesn't make him one, and that he should walk away from a fight. But the film makes it seem like he learned that lesson, but then he still fights Bit. He still
Yeah.
fights Mad Dog. He hasn't learned anything. He still does it.
Yeah, I suppose by the end they rectify that in the car scene. But I do agree with you. Yeah, it sort of presents it where he's going to learn from his mistakes, but then it could have ended very badly for him there.
Yeah, definitely. And the whole reason that they make this really rushed plan to have like the train push the DeLorean, which is insane. The whole reason that they
I
have
love
that
it. Though.
plan
I love it.
is because they were both scheduled to either one of them was scheduled to die on that coming Monday with the shootout with Mad Dog. So
Mhm.
once they subvert that and get Mad Dog arrested, neither of them are in trouble. So like why do they still go ahead with their dangerous rushed plan? Like now they have an infinite amount of time to reevaluate and make a better
Yeah.
plan, and they still don't.
That being said, I really do love the suspenseful like train ending, especially when Clara gets involved, because like it's sort of the film sort of like understates the fact that like when Doc sort of uses the hoverboard to escape with Clara, like he's stuck in 1985, where the film makes you think that until it ruins it by having him with a steam train time machine, which I really disliked.
Yeah, I mean, to me, Marty seemed like way too cool about leaving him in the past. Like,
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
I feel like Doc gave him like a nod, and I thought that meant like, cool, thanks for giving me the hoverboard. I saved Clara, and then Marty just fucks off. He's like, yeah, okay, I get you, Doc, and then just
back to
leaves him in the
Jennifer.
past. Yeah, it just didn't occur to me that that's what Doc wanted, but I guess it worked out for the best. I mean, I assume he left Doc in the past, and then Doc lived, many years with Clara, had children,
Yeah,
and then throughout that time he was developing
at
the
least
the
4 years.
time machine,
At least
and
four
I
years,
guess
I'd
his
imagine.
yeah, and then I guess his first stop was in 1985. So I guess it doesn't ruin the fact he still lived out part of his life in the past, but
Yeah. So
uh,
yeah,
yeah,
if you think about it logistically, right? Let's say Doc. Let's say on average, right? Let's say Clara is about 40. Would you say that's fair?
yeah, fair.
Let's say she's about 40, right? And this is going to get way too deep into the film, but let's say she
Actually, she's maybe a bit younger because I
okay,
think I
let's
think
say
the actress
35,
is
right? Yeah,
yeah, sure,
let's say
yeah,
30.
okay,
Okay, let's say 35, and let's say she the amount of years she has until she can't have children is about 10 years, right?
sure,
So that makes her that brings us into the year 1905 until okay,
okay,
so that brings us into the year 1905. The kids are about 5 years old. That brings us to 1910. Where is Doc getting a like? Where's he getting like a flux capacitor in the year 1910?
I'm baffled honestly.
He's Doc. He's a smart guy, I suppose.
I I mean I guess all he needed, uh, I guess he could have invented everything, and then all he needs is plutonium, which I guess has been around forever, but was only discovered, at
Sure.
a certain time.
Yeah.
So
He's a
yeah, I
smart guy, I
guess he has
suppose.
all the technological capabilities if he creates it himself.
Yeah, I'm looking too much. I know I'm being crude there, but like I don't know. I would have rather just Doc would have been happy just staying with Clara rather than create a time machine again.
Yeah, I agree with you. Uh, Especially because we can go into the end in just a minute,
No worries.
uh, where we'll talk about all of that. So thankfully, Marty is marginally less of an idiot, and I was glad that we were able to see like the forecasted or the forecast accident subverted. The
Agreed.
predicted
Yeah.
car accident. I was glad to see that he wasn't a complete idiot.
Yeah, I sort of like how that is a bit like that's a bit of an underrated scene in the film because we see that they pick up the Jennifer character straight from where the second film left off without really showing her throughout the third film, which I thought was really interesting, man. Because the film, you sort of forget about her character until that final scene where Marty was like, "Oh, I got to go back to Jennifer," so I thought that was really great.
Yeah. Also, that we sort of see that in sort of parallel to George's relationship with Biff in part one, we see uh, we see that Marty also has an adversary called Needles, which if he was just in this film, that's okay. Oh, it's just this guy who's like forcing him to drag race. That's okay. But he's also in the second film as Marty's boss in the future, which is
Yeah,
a comparison again to Biff and George. And then he sort of says, "Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Needles," whatever. and then you see in the corner, like, Jennifer's watching these events, and she's like, needles? And I'm like, yeah, a character that we've never seen or heard of
Yeah,
before. So
yeah.
like, you can't pretend like that's a reveal, because
Needles?
we
Yeah,
haven't met that character yet.
yeah.
It was just baffling to me that they
The
sort
way,
of treated him as an existing character, but didn't even properly introduce him in the present
yeah.
slash past until part three.
Man, you've nailed it there. And the way you said needles was so similar to the way Kevin Spacey says you like muscles in American Beauty. So similar. Uh, Lester, look at those arms. You like muscles? Oh, that is what a line. What a line.
Mm, yeah. So we can talk about now sort of the final part of the film, which is Doc returning on his in his time machine steam train.
It looks cool.
What were your thoughts on that?
I was disappointed, but at the same time, I got strangely emotional at this one when sort of when Marty McFly realizes like he can't go back in time anymore because the DeLorean's ruined, and it sort of presents the plot line where like Doc is stranded in 1885, but they kind of subvert that and ruin it for me with Steam Train Time Machine. However, the Steam Train Time Machine does look awesome. It looks cool.
It does look great. But yeah, I agree with you. They sort of ruined it because I would have much preferred, a definitive, conclusive ending, either where Doc stays in the 21st century or in the 20th century and settles down in the 1990s, which is actually what the Back to the Future animated series is about.
Okay.
But we don't see that definitive ending here, and that is considered by the makers of the films like as an alternate universe. So we don't see Doc return to 1985 and stay there, but we also don't see him stay in 1885 and stay there. And I would have preferred either of those to just, oh, and he goes on further adventures.
Yeah,
Like, for this to be a complete, definitive final film, like a saga, 1 6 hour
I agree.
movie, I
Good
think it
point.
needed, a firm ending where he either stays in one time period or the other.
I kind of felt bad, man, for Marty because he sort of it sort of seems like Clara is his new companion now and their kids, and they get that they're a family now, but like he's just like kids. This is Jennifer. This is Marty. See ya, and then just leaves without Marty.
Yeah, he just loses his like he just loses his best friend and then leaves without him. Yeah, it was really disappointing to see, honestly, because I don't think that's consistent with Doc.
Not at
Because
all.
even the 1955 version of Doc that meets Marty for the first time in his consideration of the world, he still befriends him and becomes his best friend within like 3 days.
Yeah.
So if Marty has known Doc for years, uh, they must be the closest of best friends,
Oh
and
yeah,
he
man.
literally just ditches him
Yeah.
to go on further adventures. It's like, Doc is the one that talks about like, the infernal time travel. It's ruining our lives. We've made so many mistakes. We need to destroy the machine. And then he makes a huge steam train time machine, and then just recklessly time travels like with his wife and kids just for shits and giggles.
Yeah, yeah. Like it sort of goes against the message that he wanted the DeLorean destroyed, which it didn't anger me, but it disappointed me a little bit. But I suppose it does leave room for a potential fourth film, which I think would be interesting. Like, would you like to see a fourth film? Because both actors are still like young enough, I think, to portray these characters again in a potential movie set in 2020.
Yeah, no, I don't think I would enjoy it at all, really. I think that this was, well, whilst I would have liked a firmer, more definitive ending. Uh, you know, we've seen all the story we need to see.
Okay,
We've seen enough of the characters, and I love them, but I don't want to see any more and have them risk ruining their legacy.
I
How
respect
do you
that, man.
feel?
I agree, buddy. I agree. The only thing it would maybe interest me is like I don't know if they could de-age the characters, and but that would be really tricky. Be really tricky. And also like the ending of this film, it I would rather like a really emotional ending where like both of them are stranded in their
Where Doc dies
no,
finally.
like but I would rather an emotional ending where like it turns out yeah Doc still dies but he dies of old age rather than I know I say I keep wanting Doc to die but I'd rather an emotional ending where like Marty you know, goes to the cemetery and realizes like Doc's name is still there, but he died, years later. So I don't know. I'd rather an emotional ending than rather than like a fun adventure teasing a potential fourth film, but then not expand on it. I was disappointed by the ending.
Yeah, I do. I actually really agree with you. If they had shown his grave and then said, like, and he was survived by his loving wife and his 2 kids, Jules and
Yeah,
Vern.
yeah, completely.
That gives complete conclusion to his character, and shows that he lived a long and happy life. So I would have absolutely no issue with that, and I think yeah, that is a better ending than just saying, and he could hypothetically go on further adventures in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah, I prefer that sort of definitive emotional ending that you've presented. Yeah, I really like that.
Either that or just have him just the final shot of him being like 1885 being happy and stuff, but I still had a good time with this film, man. Did you have any concluding points, Callum?
Well, just sort of as you said, that being back in time would make him happy. I'm pretty confident that being in the future would make Clara unhappy and confused because, I
Yeah.
mean, she's lived her, however many years in the 1800s. So, I mean, she's going to have a very difficult time grasping the future. More difficult, I would say, than someone going into the past and grasping that because,
Yeah,
there's
man,
nothing,
completely. Great point.
crazy about that because how the past, everything that existed in the past, but you won't be able to understand everything that will exist in the future.
It's a really good
So
point, mate. That's a really good
so
point.
yeah,
I
I
agree.
don't think I think they should have kept him in 1885 100%.
I agree, man. Completely.
So do you have anything final, or
Nothing from me,
would you like
mate.
to share your rating for the film?
Yeah, sure. So I had a great time with this film. I think it's probably the weakest for me out of the three films, but I think it's still a fantastic film. The ending does let it down for me, but I just love how it redefines its own genre in a sense and becomes a Western with sci-fi undertones, as you put it perfectly. So yeah, I'd probably give it an 8.5 out of 10, mate. What would you give it?
Sorry.
The suspense.
So no, it wasn't intentional suspense. I was just yawning. But I would say that I find it on par with the first film. I love it as much as the first film, and I would say
That's great.
it's the only film to capture the same amount of originality. I think that the second film, there's too many rehashes. There's too many callbacks. But the interconnectivity between 2 and 3 is incredible because they were filmed back to back. So
Yeah.
I've said that maybe 8 times, but I just need to hone in on the fact
Yeah.
on how revolutionary and incredible that makes the storytelling.
Sure.
So I definitely love it as much as the first film. It's as original as the first film. I have to give it a 10 out of 10.
Awesome, man. I thought you had some great points in there, buddy, and I think this will this have to go into must see movie mates because it's probably our longest
I
episode, and
think so.
also and it's we've gone into really great depth here, so that's great. And I just had one last question for you. Now, this is sort of our first venture into time travel movies. We've done time loops before, but this is our first time travel episode. And I wanted to ask you, just to conclude the episode, where would you time travel to, past and future?
I would never travel to the future because I would worry about influencing myself, and even if I knew my future, I wouldn't be one to like try and change it. Even if it was bad, I wouldn't try and change it because
Sure.
I would know that it's futile. So I would never want to see the future. So if I had to go into the past, I would go obviously before my lifetime so that I can influence my events accidentally. Uh, I mean, a lot of people say, "Oh, I'd go and see a Shakespeare play, or I'd go and do this." You've got to remember, like, people didn't wash. Like, those streets are smelling of shit. So you have to go back, like, you have to go back to like an acceptable time. So I'd probably go back to like the 80s and just enjoy some of the like underground raves, like, and enjoy the
Yeah.
music.
Yeah.
But like, I wouldn't want to interact with the people just due to like cultural attitudes. Like people say like, oh, I'd go back to the 50s or whatever, but then you've got to you've got to deal with people being racist, which
Yeah.
you should never have to deal with. But if you're in those times, that there's nothing that you as one person can do about it, and there isn't enough of a movement of people to do something about it at that time, at least.
It's a great point.
So yeah, I'd probably go back to the 80s,
That's a
but
good
not
one.
interact with anyone.
That's a good one, man. That's a
How
good one.
about you?
I would go back to, if I could go twice, I'd go to my grandparents' wedding day, and then
Lovely.
the second one, I think the control room for the Apollo 11 launch, just to see humanity's reaction to the success of that launch. I think that would have been really cool just to see people's celebration of that.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah, I suppose just yeah, the idea of the moon landing is an amazing idea of being able to see, but I guess that just didn't have enough of a cultural impact on me. But I
Fair enough,
imagine if
man.
you were
Yeah,
living then, that was like
the
the
thing.
biggest thing to happen ever in your lifetime.
Yeah, and that kind of got me thinking, man, what you just said. Like, what do you think is the biggest event of our lifetime?
quite unfortunately, probably coronavirus.
Yeah, that's a great point. I would say top three probably, and they've all happened in the last sort of 5 years. Well, maybe I would say top four, like Iraq War, Donald Trump, Brexit, and coronavirus. Probably the biggest.
Yeah, they're probably the most culturally impactful occurrences. Also, Black Lives Matter
Oh yes, yeah,
is,
yeah,
is
well,
is is a huge influence. Uh, but yeah, it's been quite a big year this year,
it
hasn't it,
has. Oh
for
man,
the history books?
it's been crazy, buddy. It has been. I think this one will go down in the history books without doubt.
Yeah, there will be entire modules like a full 2020 textbook.
Geography, you know the way geography, like you do case studies and stuff. I think 2020 coronavirus will probably be a case study.
Yeah, it'll probably be huge. And people have sort of, sent out like parody like history questions of like, for 20 marks, explain the significance of memes to
Yeah,
to help people's
yeah,
mental health during the coronavirus,
yeah, man.
or examine the importance of hand sanitizer and toilet roll during 2020.
Yeah, or locked or like social distancing measures.
Yeah,
But listen,
I
man.
mean, I'm sure in biology
Oh yeah,
it'll probably become a thing.
definitely, man, definitely. It's gonna be it's probably gonna last for into the foreseeable future. Social distancing, anyway, won't it?
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, we've been told that probably at least our first semester of university will be
Yeah,
probably over a Zoom call.
I know, man. It's gonna be. At least we'll be used to it with our conversations over Zoom.
Yeah, definitely.
I actually,
So
sorry,
yeah,
no,
yeah, go ahead.
no. I was gonna
Oh
say
no,
like
mine's completely off topic.
the delay of the the way sometimes in Skype calls and Zoom calls you get delay. I don't actually notice it as much anymore. Maybe it's because we record more often, but like even listening back editing, it's like we're in the same room to me.
Yeah, I think having a better mic helps, and the fact that my internet's been a little less spotty in the last few weeks,
Maybe,
I
maybe.
think that's
What were we
helpful.
gonna say? What were we gonna say before I interrupted you?
I was just gonna say one of the biggest and greatest parts of Back to the Future's legacy is its influence on Rick and Morty.
Yeah, 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 completely. Man. I noticed the similarities there. I was watching a video on Back to the Future 4, and apparently there was the creator of the movie wanted to see a crossover there. I think that'll be cool.
Yeah, so originally Rick and Morty was actually like it's one short animated sequence called The Adventures of Doc and Marty.
Yeah,
Uh, have you seen it?
I haven't seen it, but now that I think like Rick and Morty, Morty is probably a ripoff of Marty,
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
it is an absolute parody. But if you watch The Adventures of Doc and Marty, it is disgusting. Like it takes like their relationship to a weird sexual level
Oh no.
where they're like, oh yeah, we're best buds, and then like Doc will just say to Marty, lick my balls, Marty, lick my balls. Like there's this weird, like it's so weird and
Oh,
sexual. Like it's really
no
disturbing.
context
So
movie mates.
yeah, so then when it was developed for television, obviously they couldn't use the Back to the Future characters, so they had to make it an even further parody and rename the characters. But I think a lot of the relationship dynamic from the films, not from that sketch, thankfully. Uh, more the tone of the films carries over to Rick and Morty, and I think I
That's
think
so
they're
interesting.
equally magical, and I really love them.
Absolutely, mate, absolutely. And it's great to see Back to the Future have such an amazing legacy because it does deserve it.
Yeah, definitely.
Did you want me to wrap up the episode then, buddy?
Yeah, sure.
No worries. So it's been great recording with you today. It's been our longest episode. We've nearly been on for 3 hours, I think. So
Close to, yeah.
yeah, but yes. Just to let any viewers know, Callum and I have created a romantic comedies playlist as well, with the release of our part two. So go check any of those two movies out if you haven't already, or sorry, those two episodes out if you haven't already seen them. Thank you to everyone who has supported us over the last few weeks. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and yeah, leave your thoughts on these films in the comment section down below. Email us with any podcast suggestions or questions at moviemeetspodcast@gmail.com. The link to the email will be in the description for you. And yeah, man, it's been great recording with you today. Had a blast.
Great seeing you.
No worries, man. And yes, hope you guys are all safe and well. Take care and bye bye.
Bye bye.